What do you mean you weren't born in Chicago? What do you mean? What do I mean? I mean that I wasn't born in Chicago, but in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I said, trying not to laugh at my wife's obvious upset at such a trifle as my birthplace. Why, what difference does it make? Steve, it makes all the difference in the world, she said angrily. It means that the astrological chart I made for you before the wedding is wrong. I knew all this craziness had to have something to do with the positioning of the planets, but this was beyond all expectations. Cora, my wife of 4 years, was mad at me because I didn't bother to tell her where I was born before we got married. Now she has no idea if the stars say we are compatible as a couple or not. How the hell someone as smart as my wife can get so caught up in all this astrological nonsense, I'll never know. Sure, I've been aware of her interest in it since we met a little over 5 years ago, but I always thought it was more of a hobby than anything else. I mean, no one can really and truly believe in this stuff, right? Hell, I have golf. She has astrology, no big deal. I first met Cora at a party and fell in love with her from the moment she smiled at me. She was smart and witty, had an infectious laugh and sparkling blue eyes. I'm usually shy around women, but she was very popular, and I knew that if I didn't make a move, someone would snatch her right out from under my nose, so I made the move. About 10 minutes after we were introduced, I asked her out, and damn it, she didn't say yes. We found common ground from the start. We liked the same movies, songs, performers, everything. And we liked doing things together, especially photography. It's what I do for a living. Cora was very beautiful, with a great figure and extremely photogenic. She loved modeling, and she also had a good eye and knew what it took to make a good photograph. After some technical training using my equipment, she became a pretty good photographer herself. I loved the interaction that occurred between us. There was only one area we didn't agree on: astrology. I think it was our third, maybe fourth date when she brought it up, and I basically told her what I thought about all that nonsense. So, other than her telling me a few times when Mercury was going retrograde, she never really talked to me that much about it. But that didn't mean she had abandoned it. She had a whole group of friends who shared her interest. Cora was a member of an astrology club that met every Thursday night. The woman who led the club, Barbara, taught astrology in her home. She taught people, including my wife, what it meant when people were born at certain times of the year. This determined their zodiac sign, rising sign, and the character traits they would possess, as well as how the stars aligned next to certain planets and how all that muck affects your life. And of course, you can't forget how to make an astrological chart of a person and trace all aspects of their life from cradle to grave. You get the picture. Barbara was a lovely middle-aged lady and probably my wife's best friend. She no longer taught, but the club was made up of former students and was mostly an excuse for them to get together and chat over a couple drinks each week. And they all enjoyed themselves, and I had no problem with that. What's more, they were always invited to our parties and outdoor barbecues. They were nice people, and aside from their fascination with ruling planets, I liked them too. Out of respect and not wanting to embarrass my wife, when the conversation turned to astrology, I just smiled and nodded meaningfully. After seeing the extent of my wife's irritation over something as trivial as a mistaken birthplace, I realized that after all our years together, I had underestimated how seriously my wife took all this crap. Honey, if it was so important, why didn't you ask where I was born before you made the map? I just assumed. I mean, both your mom and dad were born here in Chicago, and I know they were living here at the time you were born, so I just naturally assumed you were born here too. Well, don't get mad at me. If you had asked, I would have told you. Hell, honey, I didn't even know you made my map before we got married. Of course I made your map. I wouldn't have married you if I hadn't, she said curtly. Cora immediately pulled some of her astrology books out of the bookcase, sat down at the dining table, placing a new, clean zodiac chart in front of her, and began to chart our future by the stars again. I could see she wasn't in the mood to make dinner, so I looked in the fridge, but didn't see anything in there that I particularly wanted to make. How about we order pizza for tonight? Saying that, I realized I'd let my frustration with all this BS show in my voice, but she didn't even notice. Oh yeah, okay, she mumbled without looking up. I waited patiently for over 2 hours for my beloved wife to come back to life. All the while she was silent and hardly ate. At last, she raised her head with a sigh and a frown. So, what's the verdict? Are we going to grow old together or go to divorce court? Said I sarcastically. She threw me a lewd look and cheerfully replied, I don't know, I'm just really disappointed. I was taken aback by her comment. What? Disappointed in what? Let's just leave it at that, okay? I don't want to talk about it. I was fine with that, at least for the moment. I was annoyed, And now was probably not the time to get into a relationship. I'm sure I'd say things that I wouldn't be able to take back later. So I left the subject. She was pretty quiet the rest of the evening, and I was too. But I had a plan. I know, typical male reaction. But what the hell? They say actions speak louder than words, and I was ready to show her that I was the same loving husband I had always been. What's with the nightgown? I just felt like wearing it tonight, she answered honestly. Really? Just felt like wearing it? We've been married for 4 years now, and unless you count the honeymoon, this is the first time you've worn something to bed when you haven't had your period. What's going on, Cora? Is it really all about that stupid astrological chart? I don't want to talk about it, Steve. Just drop it, she said, crawling under the sheet and turning her back to me. No, I won't drop it. That's what you said earlier, and I said okay. Because I thought you were just in a bad mood. But if it might affect our personal lives, then we're damn well going to talk about it. So what's going on? She lay silent, ignoring me. Damn it, Cora, you're really starting to piss me off. If you think you're going to lie there and ignore me, you're wrong. I can guarantee you won't sleep a wink until you answer me. She quickly rolled over onto her back with a big, deliberate sigh designed to show me how annoyed she was. She still wasn't looking at me, just staring at the ceiling. You're just not the person I thought you were, okay? Now can we just drop it, please? No, we can't drop it. What do you mean, not the right person? What do you mean? I wasn't about to put my hands down to have a statement like that hanging over me. She delayed answering again, but I think she realized that it wasn't going to go away until we cleared the air. Okay, well, she finally muttered. The graph shows that you don't have the honesty I thought you had. I thought you were honest to a fault, but now I know you're not. You must be joking. For heaven's sake, Cora, you've known me for 5 years. Have I ever lied to you in that time? Have I ever done anything that would justify such a statement? Think about it. It's very important, Cora. It concerns you and me. Use your own mind instead of relying on the stars. I'm the same man I've always been, and I don't care what that stupid piece of paper says. I'm your husband. I love you, and I hope you still love me. I waited for confirmation, but it didn't come. Don't tell me you've lost your love for me based on that chart. No, of course not. I just need some time, that's all. Can't you do that, please? Can't you give me some time? Okay, but how much time? I don't know. I need to think about it for a while. Okay, you think about it, and then call me when you come to your senses. In the meantime, I'll sleep in the spare room, I said, getting out of bed and stomping towards the hallway. I'd rather sleep in bed alone than have you lying next to me in that stupid nightgown and not be able to touch you. After beating the pillow and finally calming down, I heard her crying a good, I thought. At least she still has feelings. I don't know how well she slept, but if 2 hours was enough for me, I was lucky. I tossed and turned all night, unable to believe that after everything we'd been through over the past 5 years, she could make such a statement. I'm not the man she thought I was? I'm not an honest man? I opened my eyes wide as the sun began to break through the blinds. Screw this, I thought. I won't be able to sleep again, so I better get up. I showered in the hall bathroom, then made my way to the master bedroom, grabbed some clothes, and went back to the spare room to get dressed. I don't know if Cora was actually asleep or pretending to be, but she didn't move while I was in there. It was the first time since we'd been married that I'd left the house in the morning without kissing Cora. Since I had arrived 2 hours early, I stopped by Denny's to get some breakfast. I sat there wondering if I could concentrate on my work. A client had come into the studio, and I needed to shoot a mock-up for their ad campaign. I needed to focus, but there was no way I could get the events of the previous night out of my head, and my emotions were running wild. 1 minute I was furious, the next I was melancholy. I pondered whether I could have behaved differently. Maybe I should have given her more space and just backed off. I don't know who can figure out women. It was just damn hard for me to believe that she had such faith in this astrological gibberish. As I suspected, it was a hard day at work. I just couldn't think about what I was doing. I loved my wife and didn't want to continue our little feud, even if it meant I had to blink first. On the way home, I bought a dozen red roses and an apology card. When I pulled up to the house, I was surprised she wasn't home yet. She's usually 10 to 15 minutes ahead of me, and with the fact that I'd stopped, it turned out to be about 20 minutes later than usual. I put the flowers in a vase and set them on the table in the foyer, so she'd see them as soon as she walked in. I leaned the card against the vase. I wanted to see her reaction, so I was upstairs peeking out from around the corner as she walked in and watched her open the card with a slight smile. She took only a second to read it, then leaned over and smelled the flowers. I thought I'd hit it like Flynn, But then she nonchalantly tossed the card back on the table and walked into the living room. This made things worse. I couldn't tell if my peace offering had achieved the desired goal or not. Well, I thought, I have one more trick up my sleeve. Let's see what happens. Hi, sweetie, I greeted her as I walked down the stairs as if I hadn't even spied her. I leaned down to kiss her on the lips. She didn't pull away, but she didn't meet me halfway either. It annoyed me, but I tried not to show it. I know people get mad at each other, but it's usually when the person screwed up somehow and did something wrong. And I didn't. I guess that's what bothered me so much. The absurdity of it all. Anyway, I kept my composure and just kissed her. Thanks for the flowers, that was nice, she said with a hint of a smile. That's okay, dear. I also made reservations at Chez Louis. Her smile got a little wider, but she thought for a couple seconds before agreeing. While we were getting dressed, she was still a little reserved, but she started to mellow over dinner. She relaxed even more when I took her out on the dance floor a couple times. The smile I love so much returned, and we started talking again. How did the shoot for the ad campaign go today? It went well, I said. In fact, it took me most of the day and several tries before I came up with something the client found acceptable. You got home late today, is everything okay? I asked. Yeah, I just had a rough day at work and had to stay late until I was done, she commented. Again, I was glad to hear that she'd had a rough day too. I figured that meant she was just as worried as I was about the night before. Over the next few months, things were as good as they could be. Cora was still the same sweet, loving woman I had fallen in love with, and never once mentioned my birthplace or my honesty. I was sure Cora realized she was doing something stupid by believing so much in the stars and came back to reality. I very rarely had to leave town on an assignment, but every once in a while it happened. Hi, honey, I greeted her when she answered. The phone. I always tried to give her as much advance warning as possible when I was about to leave for the night. Hi, honey, how was your day? She replied. It's great, babe. I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to Peoria next week. I have a new client, and he wants to do a shoot on the Riverwalk waterfront. I was hoping it would be a weekend shoot. I thought you and I could have a little mini vacation, but we had to get permission from the Riverfront Association, and all they gave us was next Wednesday and Thursday, so I'll be gone overnight. I'll be home Thursday night, but probably not before you leave for your astrology club. Okay, dear. Thanks for calling and letting me know. I don't feel like spending all Wednesday evening alone. Maybe I can talk my sister into going out to dinner. Do you mind? I don't mind. No, no, of course not. Why should I mind? Well, some men don't like their wives to go out at night without them. Darling, I trust you unconditionally, you know that. Besides, how much trouble you could get into with Dodie. She couldn't keep a secret if world peace depended on it. Cora chuckled. Yes, that's my sister, all right. All right, dear. I'll call her and see if she can go. Will you be home on time tonight? Sure, no problem, babe, I assured her. As I hung up the phone, I wondered how many couples in the world have a marriage as strong as ours. Not many, I was sure of it. That Saturday night, Cora had made the first move, and I liked that about her. I'd heard from some of my buddies that their wives never initiated. Cora did it all the time, and when she did, she usually became the aggressor. As early as Sunday morning, we were both tipsy. I could always tell when she was fully asleep by the cutest little snore I could hear. I was still breathing a little heavy, looking up at the ceiling and letting my thoughts wander. I was happy, happier than I had ever been, and I didn't even think it was possible. Only one thing could make me even happier: a baby. When Cora and I got married, she had been working at a bank for less than a year, and I was a young photographer desperately trying to make it in the world. We decided to wait until we were more financially secure before having kids. I hadn't told Cora yet because so much depended on the Peoria shoot, and I didn't want to get her hopes up until I was sure. But if everything went right and the client was happy with my work, he would be at the top of my client list in no time. His company's advertising work would almost double my annual income. I thought it might be time to finally start a family. I would wait until I got back and made sure everything worked out. But once everything was determined, I would sit down and talk to my lovely wife to see how she would feel about me walking around with a big belly for 9 months. I could feel a wide grin forming on my face. God, I could hardly wait. As is usually the case during a long road trip, all the way to Peoria, I thought about everything in the world. I wished Cora could come with me. She was great when they took her on assignments. Not only could she model if I needed it, but she knew how to help me set up lights and reflectors and was a source of new ideas. She was always welcome on any shoot. I also couldn't help but think of all the astrological nonsense. I wondered if I should try to talk her out of taking this nonsense too seriously. Thoughts of the fight it had caused and her declarations that I wasn't who she thought I was still echoed in my ears. It was scary to think that she could have been so heavily influenced by this junk. I figured trying to debunk this nonsense would lead to more problems, but I couldn't help but speculate that she was still doubting the man she married. I hoped not. I questioned whether I should just come out and ask her about it or leave it at that. But if things went right over the next 2 days and I wanted to discuss the baby issue, I suppose I would find the answer to my question then. By Thursday noon, we were done. Everything was going smoothly, and we finished 2 hours ahead of schedule. The client was ecstatic, and I was on top of the world, heading north and watching Peoria disappear in the rearview mirror. I still had to stop by the studio and unpack all my equipment, but there was a chance I could make it home in time to see my beautiful bride before she left for her astrology club. As it turned out, I missed her as I drove past Brad and Gail's house. They lived across the street, and Brad was one of my best friends. He was in the front yard, and I stopped to say hi to him before pulling into my house. "Hey, old buddy, where have you been? We haven't seen each other in a couple days." "Hey, Brad. Yeah, I had to make a trip down to Peoria. I see I missed my favorite wife," I said, as I saw her car was gone. "Yeah, she left no more than 5 minutes ago." "Damn, and she looked pretty good. She must have a hot date," he joked. "Yeah, right. She better not," I joked back. "The only date she's allowed is a date with me." We talked for a couple more minutes until someone pulled up behind me and honked for me to get out of the way. I said goodbye to Brad and pulled into my driveway. I was tired from the long drive and all the loading and unloading, so I was looking for something easy for dinner. I found some frozen turkey steaks to stick on the grill, grabbed a can of beer, and was ready to go. As tired as I was, it was still early for bed, and since there was nothing else to do, I wandered into my office to start going through the pictures from Peoria. When I started, I just wanted to look. I had no intentions of editing them, but sometimes I just couldn't help myself. And before I knew it, I was going through each photo, making notes and selecting the best shots for the client's needs. I was so engrossed that I completely lost track of time until I heard the sound of the front door. "Hello, beautiful," I greeted my wife with a smile. "Honey, I thought you were already in bed," she replied, kissing me. I glanced at the fancy watch we had gotten as an anniversary gift from her parents. "I didn't realize it was so late," I said, seeing that it was almost 11. "You're getting home pretty late yourself. You didn't have car trouble, did you?" No. We all had a long discussion about whether Pluto was a planet or not, that's all. I didn't realize it was so late. I'm very tired, but I think I'll go and go to bed." "You don't mind, do you?" she asked, already heading for the stars. "No, of course not, honey. Give me a few minutes to finish some notes from Peoria, and I'll be right up." "Oh, yes," she said, as she walked up the stairs without looking back. "How did it go?" "Great," I replied enthusiastically. "Good," she replied as she reached the top landing. I was a little disappointed at her apparent lack of enthusiasm, but to be honest, I hadn't told her the significance of the job, so it was just another assignment for her. I returned to the office. It took me about 10 minutes to finish what I had started. I was again disappointed to find Cora already asleep when I crawled over to her. I lay there for a few minutes trying to come to terms with the disappointment. I had been so enthusiastic when I got home, but it was fading fast. As I told myself, since I hadn't told Cora how important this one assignment was, I had no right to be upset about her response. I finally consoled myself with that thought. But just as I was about to pass out, Brad's comment about her looking so good when she left popped into my head. Sure, Cora always looks good. But when she got home, she wasn't wearing anything he hadn't seen her in a million times before. Strange, I thought, before sinking into unconsciousness. The next morning at breakfast, Cora looked a little worried. "Anything wrong, sweetie?" I asked, watching her stare off into space as she ate. "Huh? Oh no. Sorry, sweetie, I was just brooding. Is there anything you want to share?" "No, nothing important, just some stuff at work," she replied. "I just missed you last night. I saw Brad in the yard as I was pulling up to the house. He said I missed you by 5 minutes. I'll have to keep an eye out for that guy. He said how great you looked when you left. He asked if you had a hot date," I said with a smile. "I expected you to come home in your little black dress or something." "Were you disappointed when I came home in pants?" she asked jokingly. "Not at all. I'm just always glad when you're home. I don't care what you're wearing." "Yeah, it can be a bit awkward at the bank, don't you think?" she asked with a wide grin. "Maybe Brad was talking about Wednesday night. I was wearing a nice dress and high-heeled shoes when Dodie and I went out to dinner." You must have finished earlier than you thought, right? How did it go in Peoria? I never got a chance to ask, she said, changing the subject and clearly forgetting about last night. Honey, it went better than I thought it would, and I'm sure the client is as happy as I am. This will be my biggest bill to date, baby, and it will increase our income tremendously. Oh, honey, that's great, she said, finally showing enthusiasm. Yeah, I'm actually going to steal that account from one of the big studios in town. They screwed up big time in their last ad campaign. I'm pretty sure I have that account, and if I'm right, we can talk about starting a family finally, I said, watching her reaction. Maybe, she replied. What an anticlimax, I thought. We'll have to talk about that another time, honey. I have to go to work, she said, getting up from the table. She walked around me and gave me a quick kiss before walking away. She left me puzzled. I knew she had to leave, but I had expected a bit more of a reaction to my suggestion, especially since she had gotten so emotional about having kids when we had talked about it in the past. I got the impression that it was almost torture for her to put off having kids, but she understood that it was in everyone's best interest until we could afford it. So I tell her that we can finally afford it, and the response I get is, maybe? I got that uneasy feeling in my stomach again, but I chased it away, telling myself I was getting paranoid after that stupid fight over her birthplace. After all, she seemed preoccupied with something. More than likely, she hadn't absorbed what I'd said. Perhaps she'd come home tonight after thinking about what I'd said and pounce on me, demanding that I get her pregnant immediately. The thought brought a smile to my face that didn't leave my face all day until I got home in the evening. When I pulled up to the house, Cora's car was parked in the driveway, and I expected a big, loving greeting when I entered the house, but there was none. I was very disappointed when Cora didn't even greet me with her usual kiss and hug. Cora! I called out. Are you home? Here, I heard her reply. As I entered the dining room, I saw her with her astrology books again spread out on the table. I walked over to kiss her. Without raising his eyes, he gave me a peck on the cheek. That's all I got, I said and kissed her. Let me finish this, honey. Damn, I hated that shit. I figured she was trying to figure out the best time to get pregnant and was already mapping out babies based on possible birth dates. Meanwhile, nothing was cooked for dinner again, and I felt like an outcast. I got the idea to kill two birds with one stone. Hey, honey, let's celebrate my new client and go out to dinner tonight. Okay, but let me finish this first, okay? I'll be done in another 20 minutes, she said almost reproachfully. I felt like telling her to forget it if she wasn't able to show more excitement. But I didn't. Instead, I went upstairs and took a shower. By the time she came upstairs and joined me, I was almost fully dressed. So, do you have all the baby cards yet? I asked a little cynically. She completely ignored me as she headed for the shower. I wondered how to get our celebration started. As it turned out, the evening went pretty well, though she still seemed a little preoccupied. But even that passed closer to the evening as we got down to it. Finally, for the first time all day, I realized that I completely owned her attention. By the time we cuddled up together, getting ready for bed, it was nearly 1 o'clock in the morning. So, you haven't thought about starting a family anymore? I asked quietly. Quietly, I asked. Quietly, I asked. Sure, but I want to wait a couple months before I stop taking the pill, she replied. I knew that. I knew that was what she had been doing when I got home. She was trying to determine when she wanted to have a baby. I couldn't understand how she could be so sure she was going to get pregnant right away. I realized that some couples take months, if not years, to get pregnant. Oh well, I thought. Maybe she knows something I don't. Either way, we've waited this long. I guess a couple more months won't make a difference. I went to bed that night grinning from ear to ear. My business was booming. I had a wonderful, beautiful, loving wife, and I would soon be a father. I was living the best of what life had to offer, and I knew it. For most of the next week, I couldn't seem to tear myself away from my walk on cloud nine. Every night as I walked in the door, I couldn't help but show my excitement. The first thing I did was hug my beloved wife and shower her with kisses. I started flirting with her again, just like when we first started dating. I took every opportunity to feel her up, which usually led to texting between us. Life was good. That Thursday, Cora's mood changed again when she came home from astrology club. I noticed it right away. She was very quiet. I asked if something was wrong. She said no, but I knew something was up. She also looked different somehow. I tried to figure out what exactly had changed, but I couldn't get to the bottom of it. I knew that when something was bothering me, I wanted to be left alone to deal with it myself, so I decided to extend the same courtesy to her. If she wanted to talk about it, I'd be there for her. If not, I knew she'd deal with it herself. The problem was that she didn't seem like she was going to deal with it. All week, she'd kept her distance from me. I wondered if she had changed her mind about having kids and didn't want to tell me about it. I was hoping that sooner or later she would bring up what was bothering her and we could talk about it. I can be a very patient person, but after 3 weeks of this attitude from Cora, my patience was running out. Every day she seemed to pull away from me more and more, even during lovemaking. I considered confronting her and not letting her off the hook until she told me what was wrong. To prepare for the interrogation, I sat down at my desk and started going over in my mind everything that had happened, when it all started, and wondering if anything had happened at that time that might give me a clue. As I began to analyze the past month, I remembered that it all started when she came home from astrology club. I wondered if any of her friends were worried about it. But after all, they were my friends too. Why wouldn't she tell me? The more I thought, the more scenarios came to mind. Maybe they were discussing having kids and found something in the stars that was a bad omen. Knowing my views on the subject, that would certainly give her an excuse not to discuss it with me. Could it have something to do with our quarrel about my birthplace? I doubted it. As traumatic as she had taken it at first, she seemed to have quickly reconciled. No, I didn't see that it had anything to do with the current situation. Everything that happened at Barbara's astrology club. For 5 years, I had thought that stupid voodoo had never caused any problems, and now it seemed that every time I turned around, she was a cause for concern. And since I was pretty sure our problems had something to do with her astrology club, I decided to wait until I had a chance to talk to Barbara before talking to my wife. The following Thursday, I managed to smack her on the lips before Cora left. Since it was a 20-minute drive from our house to Barbara's house, I waited until she pulled out of our driveway and called. "Hi," she answered. "Hi, Barbara. It's Steve Haynes. How are you?" And there seemed to be a slight pause before she answered. "Oh, Steve, I'm fine. How are you?" "Well, I'm not too sure, Barbara. That's why I'm calling. Cora's on her way over, but she just left, so we have a little time to talk. She's been out of sorts for the last month or so. She won't talk about it, but I noticed it started after one of the astrology meetings. Can you think of anything that happened or was said that might have caused her distress? Has she said anything to you about anything being wrong?" Again, there was a pause, this time a little longer. "You said she was coming?" "Yes, she's on her way. She never misses a club meeting, you know that." "Steve, there are other club members coming soon, so I don't want to get into details until we have time to talk. You know where I work? At the intersection of Toohey and Wolf Road, right?" "Ah, yes, of course, Barbara. But now you're starting to scare me. What's going on?" "Steve, I really can't talk about this right now. Could you meet me for lunch sometime?" "Yeah, sure." I thought about my schedule for a second. "I can't tomorrow. I'll be busy all day. How about Monday?" "I'll have to rearrange a couple things, but I can make it," I said, now genuinely worried. "Sorry, Steve, but we have a meeting on Monday. How about Tuesday?" she replied. "Don't say anything about our conversation or Cora's lunch, okay?" "Yeah, okay, Tuesday, but it's a long time away. Can you give me a hint what's going on? I'm getting sick of you," I said anxiously. "No, it would be better if we talk in person." "Okay, I'll be waiting for you in front of your building at noon on Tuesday. If I can't make it, I'll call you, but if you don't hear from me, I'll be there." We said our goodbyes and hung up. Damn, now I almost regretted calling. I sat on the couch wondering what could be so terrible that Barbara couldn't talk about it over the phone. To top it all off, Cora was late home again. Not half an hour late like before, but well past midnight when I snapped out of my stupor and looked at my watch. I tried to call her cell phone, but it went to voicemail. It was 2:15 when she walked in on me. "Shit, honey, where have you been?" I was getting worried. "I almost called Barbara to see if you were there," I said, without even saying hello. "You didn't call, did you?" she replied without saying hello. "No, but—" "Don't ever embarrass me like that. I'm a big girl and I can take care of myself," she interrupted, replacing my anger with her own. "Don't talk to me like that. You had me worried. It's past midnight. What the hell am I supposed to think? The least you could have done was call and warn me you'd be late." That seemed to catch her off guard. I don't think she realized how late it was. "I'm sorry," she apologized. "Barbara and I started talking after everyone had left, and I must have lost track of time. Why didn't you call my cell phone?" "I tried, but it's turned off." "What?" she said, pulling it out of her purse. "I'm sorry, honey. I must have turned it off by accident. No wonder you were worried." She seductively walked over to me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me. "Will you forgive me?" she asked. How the hell could anyone be angry with someone like that? I had almost forgotten about the conversation with Barbara. "Yes, I forgive you," I replied with a smirk. Just don't let it happen again, I said, with a mockingly stern tone in my voice. I figured we were both too tired, but if there was any question, she answered it. Good night, she said, getting under the sheet. Good night, I replied. We hadn't even had time to cuddle properly before she was already sound asleep. As for me, I lay there wondering what Barbara was going to say to me. The next few days were torture. I tried to act normal, but all I could think about was the phone conversation with Barbara. On Tuesday, I waited for her outside the building where she worked, as promised. When she saw me, I got the impression that she was hoping I wouldn't show up. I asked where she wanted to have lunch, and to my surprise, she chose the bar and grill across the street. I was surprised because she didn't drink. She chose a quiet spot in the corner of the establishment, as far away from everyone as possible. I pulled out a chair for her to sit in and sat on the other side of the table myself. She hadn't said a word or made eye contact with me since we'd walked in. Barbara had always been a cheerful person, always the first to laugh at a joke or be ready with a kind word. But now there were no jokes or kind words as I watched her try to figure out exactly what she wanted to say to me. Her hands were shaking, and there were tears in her eyes. Barbara, what's going on? God, I hate doing this, she said, clearly in mental anguish. I'm about to lose a very good friend, but I can't help it, she said, still unable to look me in the eye. What, Barbara? Who's the friend you're going to lose, Cora? Just then the barmaid came up to take our order. It was an untimely intervention, and I had to restrain myself from being rude. To her, just to get rid of her. As soon as she turned her back to leave, I pounced on her. So, Barbara, tell me what the hell is going on? She sighed as if she was about to face a firing squad. Cora called me a couple months ago, upset that you were born in Michigan and not Chicago like she thought. She said she'd reviewed your chart and found that you weren't as honest a person as she thought. She was deceived in an early relationship, Steve. It hurt her badly, so honesty is very important to her now. Barbara, I never lied to her, I said, interrupting her. I know, Steve, and I told her that, but it really bothered her. We've talked about it several times since then, and no matter how hard she tries, she just can't get over it. It's been really hard for her because she really loves you, but she just can't help but believe in that card. According to her interpretation, one day she'll wake up and find that you lied to her about something, and then her whole world will come crashing down. About this time, the barmaid returned with my beer and placed a lemonade in front of Barbara. Your orders will be up in a few minutes, she informed us, then left again. Barbara, this is ridiculous. I'm really shocked to learn that Cora takes astrology so seriously. I thought it was more of a hobby. Oh no. She believes in it wholeheartedly, she said. She kept it from you because she knew how you felt, but she never lost her faith in the stars. Faith in the stars, I repeated, shaking my head cynically. Can't you tell her she's misinterpreting them? I tried, but she has a mind of her own, Steve. She's very good at plotting and reading diagrams, and she knows it. God, it was all so mind-boggling. I was getting more and more worried by the minute. Has she said anything about the kids? We talked about a month ago. My business is doing well, and I told her I'd like to start a family. She wasn't as enthusiastic as I'd hoped. Now I understand why. Did she say anything to you? Oh, yes. She was very doubtful about having children after she made your chart. She said she didn't think she could be a single parent. For God's sake, this is crazy, Barbara. Is she divorcing us yet? I said a little louder than I intended. Barbara's face changed. She looked like she was in agony. What? Asked I fearfully. Don't tell me she's filing for divorce. No, I don't think so, but... But what, Barbara? Come on, tell me what the hell is going on in her head. Steve, I don't know exactly, but... Well, we had a new guy come into our club a couple months ago. His name is Mark Goodsum. Of course, we all made his chart and started discussing it with him. We do it with everyone. Anyway, we all started comparing his chart to our own, and found that his chart and Cora's matched perfectly. I mean perfectly. According to their charts, they were born to be with each other. I felt uneasy. Barbara was implying that Cora had already found another man. I had to quickly excuse myself, get up and run to the bathroom. Tears came to my eyes before I even got there. I immediately went into one of the stalls where I was sure I was going to throw up, but a few minutes passed and I couldn't, so I washed my face and went back to the table. Barbara, is she going to leave me? To tell you the truth, Steve, I don't know. But the occasion for this meeting was when you told me Cora was going to the club. She looked at my face, then lowered her gaze again. Steve, I haven't seen Cora in the last month, she said sadly, then cut to the chase. And I haven't seen Mark either. God, never in my life have I felt like I did at that moment. Are you saying she's cheating on me? I don't know, she answered quickly. Honestly, but when you said she was coming last night, well, she never showed up, and neither did Mark. I didn't even notice the barmaid as she set the food in front of us. Enjoy your meal, she said before walking away. I slumped down in my seat. I had never felt so down and defeated in my life. I wanted to burst into tears, but I was determined not to do it in front of Barbara and the entire bar. She didn't get home until after midnight yesterday. She said you talked to her and she lost track of time, I said, almost mumbling as if I was in a trance. The woman who had just destroyed me with the truth shook her head. I'm sorry, Steve, but like I said, I haven't seen her in a month. I thought back to Thursday night and realized what had changed. Her hair was styled differently than when she'd left. I also remembered that she smelled different, like she'd just showered and used a different brand of soap. I hadn't paid much attention to it at the time, but now it all fell into place. I'm sorry, Barbara. I don't want to leave you like this, but I can't stay. If you see or talk to Cora, please don't tell her about our meeting, I said, as I stood up abruptly and threw $30 on the table. I hurried out and walked across the street to my car. I pulled into the back of the office building where no one could see me and cried harder than I ever had, even as a child. I have no idea how long I sat there, but when I finally ran out of tears, I realized I didn't know what to do. She was the most important person in my life. I was willing to take a bullet for her. How? Could she not see that we were real? She and I, not this stupid astrological nonsense that was just a fantasy? I pounded my fist on the door panel with frustration. I can't lose her, I said aloud to myself. She's my life. I just can't lose her. I was exhausted physically and emotionally. My chest was rising and falling as I tried to breathe. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to explode. I needed to think. I rhetorically asked myself what I should do, but it wasn't a rhetorical question. I really needed to come up with a plan of action. I couldn't sit in my car all day. I needed a place to be comfortable, a place where I could shut myself off from everything else and think through my options. I started the car and headed to my studio. Once I was inside, I turned off my cell phone and went into my office in the back of the building. I regretted not having hard liquor, but I never kept it in there. I did have a coffee pot, though, so I poured myself a cold cup and stuck it in the microwave. That's better, I thought. I need a clear head. I set the cup of hot coffee on the table and literally collapsed into my chair. I still couldn't believe it. Maybe it wasn't true. Maybe there's a perfectly innocent explanation. But if there was, why would she lie to me? I decided that the first thing to do was to find out if she was really cheating on me or not. If it's true, then it should be on Thursdays, and it shouldn't be hard to find out. But then what? I decided that I would figure it out when the time came. It didn't take me long to come up with a plan. Hell, it was easy. I called Brad at work and asked if he could meet me for a drink. He was surprised by my call. In all the years we'd known each other, I don't think I'd ever called him at work. I texted Cora, letting him know I'd be about an hour late, and met Brad after he left the office. He noticed me as soon as he sat down. Steve, are you okay? What's up, dude? You look like you've been crying. I just said. I think Cora is cheating on me. What? No way, you're wrong, Steve. No way. What the hell gave you that idea? We've been having problems lately, I told him. I told him about her belief in astrology and the situation with my birthplace. He sat and listened, sometimes shaking his head as if he couldn't believe it any more than I could. Then I told him what Barbara had said and how Cora had lied about where she was going the last few Thursday nights. I just can't believe it, Steve, he said, almost crying. How can she believe this hocus pocus and not see that you and she are meant for each other? I don't know, Brad, but she does. What are you going to do? First of all, I have to find out if it's true. I have to find out if she's really cheating on me or not. After that, I'm just not sure. I started to snap again and tried my best to keep my cool. I don't want to lose her, Brad. I love this woman with all my heart. I know, buddy. I know. Okay, I said, looking down and wiping my eyes again. Can you help me follow her Thursday night? Sure. Thanks, I said, still trying to deal with my emotions. I'll be behind you. She'll probably notice my car, but I doubt she'll recognize yours. I'll stay behind you, and we'll stay in touch in case we get separated. Brad nodded, but looked a little worried. What are you going to do if we find out she's cheating? You're not planning anything I need to know about, are you? You mean like beat the crap out of that Goodsome guy? Yeah, sort of, he said, a little concerned. I've certainly thought about it, but no, I don't think it would do any good, and I'd probably just end up behind bars. No, I won't do anything that we'll go to jail for. Brad seemed relieved and sighed slightly. Okay, I'll watch out the window. As soon as she leaves, I'll jump in the car and get in after her. And you'll what? Sit behind me? Yes, I said sadly. I saw something in a movie once. I thought it was clever at the time, but I never thought I'd get a chance to use it. What is it? Asked Brad. When she leaves, it'll be dark enough for her to turn on her headlights, so I'm going to knock out the driver's side taillight lens in her car. That way it'll be easier to follow her. I also have a couple of magnetic reflectors in my garage that I'm going to attach to her trunk. And if she sees them, will she know something's wrong? She won't see them. I'll do it sometime just before I leave. She'll have no reason to go after the car before she gets in the driver's seat. Okay, kid. You seem to have it all figured out. I know she lied, but I still can't believe she's cheating on you. Maybe it's something else. Something innocent. Brad, you have no idea how much I pray you're right. We finished our beers and went home. Cora was on the phone when I walked in, but abruptly cut the conversation short. Hi, honey, I said, smacking her on the lips. Who was that on the phone? Oh, just one of the new interns from work, she said. I glanced at my watch. The bank's been closed for over an hour. I know, but he had a question, and I guess he couldn't wait until tomorrow, she said. You let your interns call you at home after hours? You should tell them it's our time. If they have questions, they should ask them at work, I said firmly. I didn't really believe the caller was an intern from the bank. I assumed it had something to do with this Mark character. I didn't want to say that, but I couldn't help but show that I was angry. She didn't say anything in response, just turned to the stove and checked the roast she was cooking. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes. Why don't you go do the dishes? She said flatly. Say! I stood up and wondered how I was going to manage all this for the next couple of days and not give a hand. Everything inside me was dying. Little by little, piece by piece, moment by moment. I was dying. I continued to hope that my suspicions were wrong, but more and more evidence pointed to my worst fears. For the next few days, Cora was quiet. Usually I tried to get her out of her dormant state, but this time I stayed away as well. On Thursday, I stopped by the hardware store on my way to a photo shoot. I had a couple items I needed for later. As I pulled up to the house, I parked the car on the side of the street and then pulled into my driveway. I knew Cora would be in the kitchen and wouldn't see me, but she would hear the car pull up. I walked over to her car and hit the red plastic lens of the taillight with the small hammer I had bought. Not enough to break the bulb, but enough to break the front of the lens so that I could see the brightness of the light itself. Then I got a couple of reflectors I'd picked up from the garage before I left for work and attached them to the back of the trunk. I stood back a bit and admired my work. There would be no problem picking it up tonight, that's for sure. As I turned to walk back to my car, I saw Brad watching me from the window. He gave me a thumbs up. At dinner, we were again a little silent. Later, before heading off to her. Astrology club, Cora kissed me. I wondered if it would be the last kiss of her life. I watched out the window as she drove out of our driveway. When I looked back, I saw Brad already sitting in his car waiting for her. He let her drive down the street for a bit and then pulled out to follow her. I walked to my car as he pulled away. My phone rang as I turned on the ignition. Are you here, Steve? Yeah, I'm here. I'm one car behind you, I said as I pulled away. Do you have it? Oh yeah. Thanks to what you did to her taillights and reflectors, I couldn't lose her even if I tried. And then my stomach knotted up in a knot when I saw them turn in front of me. Well, that rules out Barbara's place, I said over the phone. Huh? Brad replied confused. Barbara's place, where she's supposed to be going. It's in the other direction. Oh, he said sadly. We didn't have to go far to pick her up. The Brightside Motel was only 10 minutes from our house. Brad and I watched as she pulled into the parking lot and headed straight for room 114. Brad pulled into the motel, but drove around the back so his car wouldn't be seen, and I followed. I'm sorry, Steve, he said as we got out of the cars. Thanks, I said, almost unable to speak. There seemed to be no more questions. People don't meet in motel rooms to play tiddlywinks. Yet, even with all the evidence, I still held out hope as I opened the trunk and pulled out the 10-pound sledgehammer I'd bought earlier. Wow, said Brad, excited when he saw her. What are you going to do with it? Don't worry, it's not for them, I reassured him. You ever watch cop shows? They all have a big battering ram they use to kick down doors. Well, I don't have a big battering ram, but I guess this will do. Can't we just ask the clerk to give us a key? He asked. He won't do that. Don't worry, I'll pay for the door. Here, I said, pulling my camera out of my bag and handing him the Nikon. I've got it all set up. All you have to do is press this button. I need as many pictures as you can take. If she wants a divorce, at least I'll have proof that I wasn't the bad guy. Okay, Brad said, taking the camera. We should probably give them a couple more minutes before we rush in. We both stood silently by the cars for another 10 minutes, and then began our march to the door of room 114. Ready, whispered I. Brad nodded his head. When the door opens, you're going to follow me and start pushing the button on the camera. Will do, he whispered back. I took a position next to the door where I could get a good swing, and in a motion similar to Paul Bunyan swinging his mighty axe, hit the door right behind the doorknob with a large hammer. With a loud crack, the metal door swung open, and wood splinters from the jam flew in all directions. The security chain flew off its fastener, and the top of the door came off, partially falling inside the room. Running into the room, I heard Cora's piercing scream and saw her cheating on me. Suddenly, everything became clear. Up until that moment, I had been planning a strategy to save my marriage, to save the woman I loved. It was at that moment that I realized that I no longer had a marriage, that I would leave the woman I loved. There was simply no way I could live with the pain of what I saw in front of me. I saw Cora's face fill with fear. I guessed she saw it in my eyes. I could feel my sadness turn to anger. My whole body was infected with it. Every muscle, every nerve tensed in response. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself down. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, Cora? I said dismissively. If the goddamn stars are to be believed, it was my honesty that was in question. You were so worried about me lying to you, but it was you who lied and schemed behind my back. It was you who betrayed me and mocked our wedding vows. I saw her hands begin to tremble. Tears came to her eyes and ran down her flushed cheeks. I think she was just beginning to realize the magnitude of her betrayal, just beginning to realize what she had lost forever. I felt fire in my eyes, looking at the man who had stolen my wife. He sat on the floor and panted, the sheet still tangled on him. I turned to her. I see you wear wedding rings, so this shithead obviously knows you're married. So much for his honesty, uh-huh? Steve, Brad said, not knowing what to do as I approached her. Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt anyone. Cora looked confused when I took her hand. Not understanding my intentions, she tried to wrench it from my grasp, but I held it firmly. She was stunned when I pulled the wedding rings from her finger. I clenched them tightly in my fist. I could feel my face burning with rage. I must have looked like a wild man as I turned around and headed for the doorway. Wait, where are you going? Steve, where are you going with my ring? Steve, wait, please, my rings, she screamed in fear. Go find out, I shouted back. I walked out the broken door and placed the rings on the sidewalk. A small group of people crowded around, curious as to what was going on. They watched as I gathered all my rage into one powerful swing. Steve, no! I heard Cora shout as I raised the hammer above my head and brought it down with all my might, shattering the rings and scattering shards of cement below, along with shards of 18-karat gold. I had no idea where the diamonds had gone. Cora sank to the floor in despair. My rings! My rings! She wheezed. Now they're broken, just like my heart, and neither of them will ever be the same, I screamed. I was in so much pain, and I wanted her to feel some of it. I don't understand, Cora. How could you hurt me so much? I loved you more than life, and this is what you did. You ruined that love just like I ruined your damn rings. I never thought you could be so cruel. Come on, I said to Brad. Let's leave the lovers alone. At that moment, a young, pimply-faced motel manager jumped out from around the corner of the building, but stopped when he saw me with a sledgehammer. He looked at the door, hanging only on the bottom hinge. His eyes read fear. Don't worry, I told him. I won't hurt anyone. I pulled a business card out of my wallet and held it out to him. Here, send me the bill for the door and sidewalk. Cora was still standing in the doorway. She covered her face with her hands and sobbed, ignoring the growing crowd of gawkers. I think she was in shock or something close to it. When Brad and I got back to our cars, I took the camera from him and tossed the sled into the back seat. Are you going to be okay? Why don't you come home with me? Just don't come back to the house right now. Thanks. I really appreciate the offer, but I need to be alone. I think that's exactly what you don't need right now, Steve. You've just been through an extremely traumatic experience. You need people around you, people who care about you. Come on, come home with me. I knew he was worried that I might do something to myself. In truth, the thought had crossed my mind. Either way, I wanted to be alone. Thanks, Brad, but no. I'll stay at the studio for a few days. I could see the concerned look on his face as I got into the car, but I'd never been so depressed in my life, and I didn't want anyone around me. I'd just come to terms with the fact that I was going to live the rest of my life without the woman I loved, and I needed time to, well, to wallow in my misery. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I took one last look at the woman who had made me so happy. At one point, her asshole lover tried to lift her to her feet, but she was slapping his hands on her legs and yelling something at him. I couldn't make out what it was. I hope she, the stars and her asshole, perfect couple, boyfriend are very happy together, I said to myself sarcastically. When I opened the door of my studio and stepped inside, everything looked different. The lights, the cameras, the racks, and all the other equipment. All the same stuff I had used for years. But it had somehow lost its importance, its position in my life. What was it all for? True, I loved my job. I was very lucky, but it was all for us. To build a life for us, Cora, me, and our children, my family. But there was no family anymore. There wasn't even a USA, just me. Was it still worth the time and effort? Was it still worth going through the ups and downs of running my own business? I turned around and left again. I locked the door and started walking. I had no purpose. I just needed to clear my head. It was time to reevaluate my life. In the dizziness of my thoughts, it seemed like I was walking past an endless parade of streetlights that cast my shadow on the sidewalk. By the time my legs were so tired that I could barely stand, I found myself facing the dark, turbulent waters of Lake Michigan. How I got there, I had no idea. I was several miles from the studio. I reached into my pocket to check the time on my phone and realized I'd left it on the car seat. The soothing sound of the night tide echoed in my head, but the rough waves came at my heels as I climbed over small rocks to a large boulder. There I crouched for a well-deserved rest. I looked around to get my bearings. Heck, I had to be 5 or 6 miles from my studio. I suspected it was an hour or two in the morning. At least I was putting that time to good use, I thought. During my little walk, I had drawn up a plan for the rest of my life, and it didn't include Cora or any other women, just me. I decided I was the only person I could count on, and vowed never to give my heart away in that way again. I had spent the last 5 years of my life building a business that I could be proud of. I used to ask myself if it was worth it. I decided that it was. This business would be my love, my only love. I will throw myself into it head first. I'm going to build the most prestigious photography studio in Chicago. Well, at least that was the plan. By the time I got back, it was starting to get light. The first thing I did was get my cell phone out of the car. My voicemail was full. I couldn't believe how popular I'd suddenly become. Brad, Cora, her mom and dad, her sister Dodie, Barbara and Julie, Cora's friend from the bank, were calling. The only ones I didn't erase were from Brad. I'd call him back as soon as I was sure he was awake. The others I wanted nothing to do with. Part of my plan was to cut myself off from Cora, her friends, her sister, and even her family, no matter how much I loved them. I just didn't want anyone to remind me of what I'd lost. In the back of the studio, I had a small room that I used as a dressing room for the models. It had a closet, makeup table, couch, and shower. I would get rid of the couch in exchange for a futon, separate half of the closet for my clothes, and the room would become my bedroom. In the study, I had a stove for cooking and a small refrigerator, all the comforts of home. I checked my schedule and found that I only had one photo shoot, and that one was at the studio at 3 in the afternoon. I set the alarm on my phone for 8 o'clock, which was only 3 hours away, and lay down on the couch. I didn't even remember closing my eyes, so quickly I fell asleep. The next moment I realized that my phone was already ringing. Would it really be 8 o'clock so soon, I thought, reaching for it. No, it was only 7. It wasn't the alarm clock that was ringing. It was the phone itself. Hello, I mumbled, trying to get as much sleep as I could in 2 hours. Steve? Are you okay? Damn it. Where have you been? Gail and I have been going crazy worrying about you. I recognized the angry man on the other end as Brad. Steve, don't ever do that to us again, his angry wife said. Good morning, Brad. Good morning, Gail, I said, a little embarrassed. I heard someone sigh, but I wasn't sure if it was Brad or his better half. Brad, I told you I'll be fine. I'm not going to do anything to myself. I took a long walk last night and left my phone in the car, that's all. Sorry if I bothered you. There was a slight pause on the other end. I guess they were just glad I was okay. Gail spoke first. Damn it, Steve. You scared the hell out of us. The first person Cora called was Dodie. She went to the studio figuring that's where you'd go. When you never showed up, she called here and asked if your car was across the street. You told Brad you were going to the studio, so when she said you weren't there, we all got worried. I'm sorry, I really am. I did go to the studio, but I left right away. When I got back, it was already dawning. You've already talked to Cora. She's called here probably 20 times already. I don't think she believed us when we told her you weren't staying here. Gail sighed. All she has to do is look across the street and see that my car isn't there. I don't think she was home yet, Steve. Brad cut in. She probably stayed with good old Mark, I said with venom. No, I doubt that, Steve. She cried a lot and begged us to call her if we talked to you. I don't think she'd talk like that if she was with him, Gail said. Well, I haven't talked to her and I'm not going to. As soon as 9 o'clock strikes, I'm going to call my lawyer and file for divorce. I don't want anything more to do with her or her idiotic starry-eyed friends or any of them. Steve, can't you just talk to her, please? She sounds really broken. Maybe you still have a chance. Maybe if you go to couples counseling or something. Gail, you weren't listening to me. I don't want anything more to do with her, I said firmly. God damn it, she literally dumped me, Gail. Dumped me for that asshole because their cards matched. That's what gets me, it's all so damn stupid. Pardon my language, I said. Yeah, I know. Brad told me that story. But I know she loves you. I bet if you gave her a second chance. I interrupted her. Gail, there will be no second chance. It's over between us. I could never go through something like that again, and I won't. From now on, I'm Stephen Haynes, a photographer, period. Not a husband, not a father, not a ladies' man, not a lover, just a photographer. Oh, Steve, please don't do this to yourself. You're a wonderful man. Don't let your heart turn to stone. I'm sorry, Gail, but it has already turned. From now on, my only love is my studio, I said coldly. 3 times during my conversation with Brad and Gail, my phone beeped, letting me know I had a call waiting. I ignored each one. After hanging up, I disconnected the phone, showered, and walked the 4 blocks to Denny's restaurant for breakfast. By the time I got back, it was about 9 o'clock. It was time to spring into action. Lou was the attorney who had helped me incorporate the company a few years earlier. I called him first. When I explained the situation, he said he would handle my divorce and gave advice on finances. The problem was that our personal account and my business account were at the bank where my wife worked. I didn't want to go there and meet Cora. Lou suggested that I not go to the main bank where she worked, but choose a branch a few miles away. I looked on the computer and chose the one that was 45 minutes away. Lou said that if Cora fought the divorce, the court might order the accounts frozen, so he advised withdrawing enough cash to get me through if necessary. Cora and I shared one credit card, which I paid off and closed before heading to the bank. Again, on Lou's advice, I was only going to take about 40% or so of the money out of our joint accounts so as not to anger the court. However, I would close my business account and transfer it to another bank. She didn't have access to that account anyway, but I just didn't like the fact that it was at the same bank where she worked. I also had a corporate credit card that I could use as a last resort. Going with Cora to Christmas parties and other social events the bank hosted, I half expected to see someone I would recognize at the branch when I walked in. But thankfully I didn't. I waited for the guy in line ahead of me to finish, then went to the window and told the teller I wanted to cash the check I handed her and close my business account. She looked at the name on the check, excused herself, and ran to the branch manager's office. I saw him make a quick phone call and then return with the teller. Hello, Mr. Haynes, he said, extending his hand. I'm Mr. Peterson, the branch manager. I can help you in my office if you don't mind. The cashier left us, walked through his office and out again on the other side of the teller window. She looked at me with a sheepish smile as I followed Mr. Peterson into his office and sat across from him at his desk. Why do we have to come in here, Mr. Peterson? Are you in some kind of trouble? I asked. I was sure Cora had already reported it, and the call to the main bank had been made to alert her to my presence. No, Mr. Haynes, he said with an awkward smile. It's just that when someone wants to close a large account like yours, it's my job to convince them to keep it here. Can I get you anything, coffee? He asked. No thanks, I said, shaking my head. I was sure this was all just a time-stretching tactic. Look, if this is going to be a serious matter, I'm going to have to come back. I have appointments in the afternoon, and I don't expect this to take all day, I said flatly. No, Mr. Haynes, just let me open your account here, he said, moving the mouse on his computer. Okay, let's see, he said, looking at the screen thoughtfully. After 2 or 3 minutes of him staring at the monitor and not saying a word, I spoke. Okay, look, you've obviously already been warned about my wife and me. I strongly suspect that you made that call to let her know I was here. Now let me make this as clear as I can. I don't want to talk to her. And if you think you can hold me for the next 45 minutes while she arrives, you're wrong. He sighed and slumped slightly in his chair. Okay, Mr. Haynes, I'm sorry, but the request to detain you came from the vice president himself. I'm sure he's called all the branch managers, so whichever branch you go to, you'll get the same treatment from all of them. It was my turn to sigh, and I sighed. Look, Mr. Peterson, I don't want to get you in trouble, but I'll either deal with this in a timely manner or I'll file a complaint with the banking commission. You can tell the vice president that I have made a threat, and I intend to carry out that threat. Yes, sir, he said, looking down. We'll set it up for you. He didn't break any speed records, of course, but in 35 minutes, I was out of there with $3,000 in cash and a cashier's check from the closed account of my business. I was halfway across the small lobby. Steve, wait! I heard her yell. I looked up and saw Cora approaching us from a side door. Damn, I thought, how the hell did she get here so fast? She must have broken every speed limit she hit. Please, please, Steve, talk to me, she begged. She looked so bad that I almost felt sorry for her. I was sure she had slept even less than I had. What the hell, I thought. Avoiding her is the most cowardly thing to do. I need to get myself together and talk to her, I said to myself. Okay, Cora, let's talk, but not here. Let's find a restaurant or a place to get coffee, I said. There's a place right around the corner, Mr. Peterson grinned, walking out of the office and knowing he had achieved his goal. We walked over, sat in a small two-person booth in the corner, and ordered coffee. Steve, I don't even know how to begin to tell you how sorry I am, she began. I can't believe I betrayed you like this. I'm so ashamed of myself. Despite what it looks like, I still love you, Steve. I hadn't said a word yet, but she was almost past the sound barrier, and I figured it was her show. She was frantically clutching her napkin. Steve, everything you said in that motel room about me being the one who lied and cheated was true. Every word of it. And I'm sorry. You were a good husband, and you didn't deserve that. I don't know why. I couldn't help myself. I had to open my mouth. Because you have more faith in stupid stars than you do in me, I said, interrupting her. I've never been in so much pain in my life, emotionally or physically. I thought I was going to drop dead in that motel room, Cora. I really did. Her eyes filled with tears. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize how much you were hurt until you broke my rings and told me that I had broken your heart that way. God, I'm so sorry, Steve. I did everything wrong. I really messed up. She picked up a napkin and wiped her eyes. But Steve, it wouldn't have worked out between us. I know you think what I believe in is utter nonsense. And, well, that's part of the problem. When I found out you were born in Michigan, and then I redid your chart, well, I realized I made a mistake. Mark and I are more suited for each other. Come on, Cora. We've had 5 wonderful. I paused for a second, then continued. No, not wonderful, but fantastic. 5 fantastic years together. You'll never find anyone more compatible than us. We could build a wonderful life together, start a family, and grow old together. Your belief in astrology ruined all of that. I just can't believe it. What a loss, I said, looking down and shaking my head. Steve, I know it feels that way to you right now, but you'll find someone you can do all these things with. Someone who's right for you. You're a great guy. I know there's someone out there. Oh, Cora, just shut up, I said, unable to listen to her ramblings any longer. Look, it's over between us. Let's just leave it at that. I don't want to hear about seeing anyone else. I don't plan on seeing anyone else. I'm going to put my whole heart and soul into the studio from now on. I'm no longer interested in a wife and family. I'm no longer interested in having kids, and I sure as hell don't want my heart broken again. Oh, Steve, don't do that, please. Don't shut yourself off. You're a wonderful man, and you're going to be a wonderful father someday. That's enough, I said. Look, you wanted to talk, and we talked. If you don't have anything else to say, I've got to go. Okay, she said, nodding her head slightly and still wiping away her tears. Despite what you think, I still love you. I can't just turn that feeling off, and I'm so ashamed of the way I acted and what I did to you. I'm so sorry, Steve. I really hope you find someone, I really do. Please don't let what I did stop you from loving someone else and starting a family. Yeah, okay, I said, getting up from the table. We said our goodbyes, I paid the check, and we went our separate ways. As it turned out, I was glad she had caught me. Our conversation gave me a sense of closure. Earlier, though I had judged them at the time, Gail's words about counseling had impressed me. After Cora's crying and acting out in the motel, some part of me wondered if she was so desperate to reach me because she wanted to try to save our marriage. Maybe she wanted to tell me that she no longer believed in astrology, that she knew I was still the man she married. Of course she didn't. There was no need for counseling. Divorce was the only option. Now, after talking to Cora, I was a little relieved. My path was clear, and there was no turning back. On Tuesday of next week, the papers would be filed with the court, and on Friday she would be served with the summons at her mother and father's house where she was staying. I I put that segment of my life behind me by sitting down and writing a new business plan for the studio. It had 3 time elements: 90 days, a year, and 5 years. It took me all weekend, but I had it all mapped out, and then I cried. Cora was very friendly, and as a result, the divorce went smoothly. We sold the house, but we had very little equity, so neither of us got much. We both found apartments. Hers not far from our house, mine 6 blocks from the studio. As planned, I dove headfirst into my work. At times, I wondered why I was paying rent at all, since the only thing I did there was sleep, and sometimes I didn't even do that. I worked day and night without even thinking about socializing. Things weren't so bad until the holidays came around. I was invited to a couple Christmas parties, but I didn't feel like going, and my folks were celebrating a belated anniversary with a Caribbean cruise. As long as I could keep myself busy with something to do, I was fine. But at Christmas, I had nothing to do. As much as I tried to stay away from all of Cora's friends, every now and then a rumor would reach me. The latest being that she and that jerk Mark had moved in together. On Christmas Day, I sat alone in my office at the studio, and for the first time in months, I cried my eyes out. It's stupid, I told myself. She's gone. Let her go. But I couldn't help it. It was the holidays, and I had never felt so alone in my life. A week later, Brad and Gail told me that if I didn't show up at their New Year's Eve party, they would never speak to me again. I used to love going to parties when I had Cora on my arm, but now the mere thought of going to one made me cringe. Other than a few models on set and a waitress ordering food, I'd had very little contact with women since my divorce. I had no one to bring to the party, and I realized I would feel out of place. I told Brad that it was nothing personal. I just didn't want to go to a party where everyone but me would be broken up into couples, but he and Gail were relentless in their insistence that I had to be there, so I went. The party started at 9. I quietly walked in around 10. I looked around and wondered if I should leave again, but I promised. So I headed over to the wet bar in the corner of their den where our host was mixing drinks. "Hey, you finally made it," Brad said when he saw me approaching. "You got a Miller Lite in there with my name on it?" I asked with a smile. "Of course I do, buddy. I saved it just for you." At that moment, I felt someone's soft hand on my arm and looked over. "Hey, Steve. I was beginning to think you weren't coming. I thought for sure we were going to have to cut you out of the will." "Hi, Gail," I said as she giggled at her joke. I leaned over and kissed her cheek. "You left me no choice," I replied. "I don't know how long I'm going to stay here. I really appreciate what you guys are trying to do, but I feel out of place. I'm just not ready to socialize yet." "Well, you better get ready because there's someone I want you to meet," Gail said, pulling me by the arm. "Oh no," I replied, holding back. "Really, Gail, I'm not ready to meet anyone yet. Please don't play matchmaker for me. Listen, I know this girl from the fitness club. Her name is Megan Biondi, and she's a really nice person." "I'm sure she is, Gail. I just don't want to meet anyone." I invited her over because she had nowhere to go for New Year's Eve. Her boyfriend left last summer for a new job, and she hasn't dated anyone since... Gail, I... Will you please stop talking long enough for me to tell you what I want to say? I apologized, and she continued. She wasn't going to come until I told her you'd be here. She knows your work. She thinks you're the greatest photographer since... Well, I don't know, since some other great photographer. Come on, Gail, you're making this up. How would she know my work? I'm far from famous, I said, not believing a word she said. She works at Alan's agency, Gail explained. Alan's advertising agency? That's one of my best clients. She works in their design department and sees your work all the time. She said she heard you were in the office a couple months ago and wanted to meet you, but by the time she got to the building, you were gone. Why doesn't she just come into the studio if she wants to meet me so badly? Heck, I'm there all the time. Well, I think she's too shy to just walk in like that. In fact, she's a little nervous today. Come on, Steve, she said, pulling my hand again. I remembered how, as a kid, my mom had set me up on a couple of blind dates with her friends' daughters. I'd quickly learned that if someone said, "She's a very nice person," that meant I should turn around and run in the opposite direction as fast as I could. Funny how that thought occurred to me as Gail led me through the crowd of partygoers to meet Megan. Suddenly, everyone around me disappeared, and I was deafened by the sounds coming from the room full of people. My gaze stopped on a beautiful Oriental woman talking to two people in the corner. You said her name was Biondi? She looks Oriental, I asked Gail. Her mother is Japanese and her father is Italian. He was killed in a traffic accident when Megan was a teenager. What about her mother? She's still alive, living somewhere in New England. Now put a smile on your grumpy face, she said, leading me over to a stunningly beautiful woman. Megan, Gail said as we approached her, I want you to meet someone. This is Steve Haynes. Mr. Haynes, I noticed her hand trembling slightly as she held it out. It's a pleasure to meet you. Gail wasn't lying. She was genuinely nervous, and it was flattering. Steve, please, I said, shaking her hand gently. I understand you work for Alan's advertising agency. I do a lot of work for them. Yes, I know, she said with a gorgeous smile. I really like your work. I was going to ask you to take some glamour shots for my boyfriend a while ago. It was supposed to be his parting gift. The first person I thought of was you. But I don't think I could have gone through with it. I would have been too embarrassed. Just before he left, we had a big fight anyway and parted on a not-so-good note. So now I'm glad I didn't take them away. God, she was so damn nice. I was beginning to think that maybe there was another woman who could take Cora's place, and maybe I'd met her. We found a relatively quiet spot in the corner of the living room and got to talking. She still seemed a little nervous, but as we talked, it started to pass. We were already getting along pretty well when... So what sign are you? She asked. I'm a Virgo. It was like someone twisted the knife that Cora had stuck in my heart months ago. I couldn't help it. I knew I was being terribly rude, but I just couldn't stay any longer. Megan looked shocked as I apologized and headed for the door without even saying goodbye. By the time I got to my car, I was having trouble breathing. By the time New Year's Eve rolled around, I was already sitting in the back room of my studio getting loaded. I'm pretty sure I passed out before midnight. The next day, I was still sitting in my chair when the phone woke me up. Next chapter. Stephen Haynes! What the hell is going on with you? Came the voice of a very upset Gail. My head was splitting. My joints were aching from the way I'd slept. And my best friend's wife was mad at me. What a way to start the new year. I hope you're proud of yourself. You know you made that poor girl cry. What the hell happened? I never knew you to be so rude. Something must have happened. She's a virgin, I said, interrupting her. There was a short pause. What? She's a virgin, I repeated. I liked her a lot, Gail, but then she started talking crap about astrology. From now on, I will have nothing to do with anyone who even as a hobby engages in that nonsense. I will not, I stated firmly. Gail paused again before she spoke. Steve, I don't think she's into astrology at all. I mean, she's never said anything to me about it. She did tell me. We didn't talk for more than half an hour when she asked me what my sign was and then informed me that she was a Virgo. I'm sorry, Gail. I honestly didn't want to bring her to tears, but when someone even mentions that nonsense, to me it's like scraping my fingernails on a chalkboard. I will have nothing to do with him, nor will I have anything to do with anyone who has anything to do with him. I heard her sigh. Yeah, I can understand that. I'm sorry, Steve. She really is a very nice girl, and I just thought you two would get along. I was hoping she could get you away from that studio every now and then. Gail, I know your heart was in the right place. I'm sure Megan is a very nice person, and I'm sorry I hurt her feelings. I really am. But please, from now on, don't play matchmaker anymore. I don't have time for that right now, okay? Okay, Steve. I'm sorry it didn't work out. I know. Do me a favor, when you see Megan again, please tell her I'm sorry. I know I shouldn't have left her like that, but I just couldn't help myself. I will, Steve, Gail replied. At least by the time we hung up the phone, we were still friends. But now I was upset again just talking about it. And besides, I felt guilty about Megan. Hell, I didn't want to make her cry. I needed to pull myself together. The shower at the apartment was much better than the one at the studio, so I decided to go home, shower, and go to Denny's to eat. Thank goodness there's a Denny's on holidays. As I sat and ate what turned out to be a late lunch, I thought back to the night before. Even though things hadn't worked out with Megan, I had to admit that it had been nice to be socializing with a member of the opposite sex again. I took one last sip of coffee, and by the time I paid the bill, I had made the decision to start going on dates again. Not often, but maybe 2 or 3 times a month. Hopefully that would be enough to have some fun every now and then, since it had been a while. The first opportunity to get back into the dating pool presented itself to me the following week. Erica Snell was a local model whose services I had utilized many times in the past. With her vast array of wigs, makeup styles, and facial expressions, she had more looks than Richard Little voices. She was also smart, had a great sense of humor, and was very friendly. We worked all day on an advertising campaign for one of the big candy distributors in town. By the time we finished the job, it was almost 5 o'clock. I was a little nervous. I hadn't asked a woman out in years, but if I did it right, it wouldn't feel like a date. It would be a simple, friendly gesture to treat a hard-working girl to dinner. "So, what do you think?" she asked, coming out of the dressing room in casual clothes and light makeup. "Am I going to be on billboards?" "Billboards? Magazine ads? Yes, anything. You heard them say they liked the shots. You're in, Erica. I heard the ad director say they could use you in a commercial." "Really?" she asked, worried. "Are you going to be in a commercial?" "No, one of the big guys in town will do it," I replied. "I don't have the resources for that kind of thing." She gathered her things to leave. "Erica, it's 5 o'clock. Let me buy you dinner for doing such a good job." She stopped and looked at me. I could almost see the hesitation in her expressive eyes. Finally, she replied, "Yes, well, I'm starving." There was a small Italian bistro just 3 blocks away. I'd never eaten there before. Denny's was only a couple blocks further away, but I wasn't about to take her there. It turned out to be a pretty good place. It had a good wine list, good food, and a relaxed atmosphere. We talked mostly about the various shots we had taken during the day and which ones we thought they could use. We were there for about an hour, and I decided I'd better go for it. "Erica, I was wondering if you have a steady boyfriend. I'm asking because, well, if you don't, I'd like to take you out. Maybe go to a show or go out to dinner and dance." She was looking at me strangely, like she was waiting to see what I was going to say, so I fell silent. "What happens if I don't go out with you? Will you stop using me?" she asked suspiciously. The question surprised me. I knew there were photographers who forced their models to sleep with them, threatening not to hire them again if she didn't, but I resented the idea that she thought I was one of those guys. "Let's just forget I asked you to," I said curtly, then added, "And don't worry, you're a great model, and I'll continue to use you like I did before." I insulted you, didn't I? I'm sorry, Steve. It's just that I get offers like that all the time, and it costs me a lot of work. I should have known you weren't like that. My apologies. "Apology accepted," I said. "I appreciate your offer, Steve. You're a really nice guy. But I really don't like mixing business with pleasure. It's fine as long as things go well in a relationship. But as soon as things go wrong, it can lead to disaster." I did it once when I was just starting out. I broke up with him 6 months later, and he talked about me to every photographer and agency in town. It was almost the end of my career. "Erica, you should know that I would never do that," I said, taking a little offense again. "I know you wouldn't, Steve, but I just see it as a conflict of interest." Like I said, she was a smart woman. She was absolutely right and had convinced me that I should look for a mate outside the profession. "You're right," I said, with a slight nod of my head. "But I still reserve the right to take you out to a victory dinner if you contract this commercial." She smiled. "You got it, Steve. In fact, if I get that publicity, I'll take you out to dinner." I realized she was just being conciliatory after turning me down, but it was still nice to hear it. For the next week or so, I didn't think about dating. The holidays were over, and I was busy again. It was about 1 a.m., and I was still editing footage in the back of my studio when I decided I needed a break. I leaned back in my chair and thought again about how nice it had been to hang out with Megan, until she told me she was a Virgo, of course. Still, I needed someone to relax with, maybe go on a date or two. I remembered my conversation with Erica and realized I had to rule out the models I was working with. So with whom and where? I hated the thought of going to a pickup bar. Places like that never worked out for me. As I sat and pondered, my stomach rumbled and I realized I hadn't had dinner. Ah, Denny's. Open 24/7. I was going to finish out the day anyway. I'd go downstairs, grab a bite to eat, and then head home and get some sleep. As I entered the restaurant, I was surprised to see Karen. She was usually working on her lunch hour. I slipped over to the counter. "Karen, you're here awfully late. Did you forget to go home?" She chuckled lightly. "Speaking of not going home, are you still working?" "Yeah. Well, no, not really. I'll go home after I eat. What about you? Why are you here so late?" "My son broke his arm a couple months ago. Even with insurance, the hospital bill was over $1,000. I asked Bill, the manager, if I could work a few more hours. I was hoping he'd let me work lunch and dinner, but instead he gave me the graveyard shift." "Well, I guess beggars can't be choosers. Isn't that what they say? She said with a smile. I was surprised to learn that she had a son old enough to break her own arm. I'd never looked closely at Karen before. She was a good-looking woman. I would guess she was only 21 or 2. How old is your son? I asked. He'll be 7 in April, she replied. If he lives that long, he thinks he's going to be a stuntman or something. He doesn't know fear. I laughed. You'll have to buy him a hazmat suit like the astronauts have. Yeah, she grinned. What are you going to be, Steve? Ah, well, I said, still looking at the menu. Since it's almost breakfast time, how about some steak and eggs? Will do, she said, turning and entering my order into the computer. And she picked up the coffee pot and started making her rounds of the other late-night customers. I sat there wondering why I never noticed Karen except to give her my order. She was indeed a very attractive woman. A young woman with money problems and a baby. I bet she wouldn't miss a chance to go out to a nice place for dinner and dancing, I thought. Sure, why not? At that moment, she came back with my order. Hey, Karen, when you have a minute, come see me. There's something I'd like to ask you, I asked. Now would be a good time, she said, as she rested her chin on her hand and placed her elbow on the counter in front of me. Ask away, she stated with a smile. I was wondering if you'd like to take your mind off work and worries for a while and come to dinner with me and then dance. She hesitated for a few seconds, looking me straight in the face. How long has it been since your divorce? She asked. The question surprised me a little. I really expected her to jump over the counter and thank me. Well, we separated a little over a year ago, but the divorce was finalized 7 months ago. I appreciate your offer, Steve, I really do. But after dating several recently divorced men, I've realized something. I've realized that they all have a lot of baggage that they carry around for a long time, she said. I guess I looked a little shocked, but she continued. Look at you. I used to see you here a lot at dinner time, and now it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and how come? Because you immerse yourself in your work. It's the only way you can survive. When I date someone, I want at least a potential relationship. I want someone who's stable in their own life. That's not you right now, Steve. I am stable, I said in my defense. I'm good at my profession. I have a growing business. Yeah, but what about what's still swirling around in your head? Grief, anger, pain. You're already looking for another relationship, I doubt it. All that emotional turmoil you went through is still there, and it's going to be a while before it all dissipates. When it does, come to me, Steve. Come and ask me when you can enjoy life and laugh again. Then I'll be honored to go out with you. I have enough emotional problems of my own right now, and I can't take on yours as well. And she leaned over the counter and kissed me gently on the lips, and then with a smile she went off to fill the bottles with ketchup. To say I was stunned was an understatement. Was I really that messed up? Maybe I was. I thought about it all the way home. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about what Karen had said. Maybe I shouldn't even think about dating yet. Hell, I couldn't get anyone to go out with me anyway. By the next day, I had pretty much given up on dating, but I still had a problem between my legs. Damn it. Dating or no dating. I had to get laid. A prostitute? I just couldn't picture myself paying a prostitute, plus it was dangerous. No, no prostitutes. But maybe, I thought, I should try going to some meat market on a Friday night and just see if I could get laid. It seemed like the best option for me at that point. The following Friday night, I decided to take a chance and went to Foxtail, one of the best pickup bars in town. Or so I was told. The place was packed wall to wall with people, mostly guys, but there were quite a few women as well. I was surprised to find a vacant bar stool and sat down on it. I ordered a beer and started looking around. I really felt out of place. Funny how lonely you can feel in the middle of a room full of people. It didn't take me long to decide that I would finish my beer and leave. I was on the verge of taking one last sip before I left when the bartender told me someone was looking at me. I looked over and saw an attractive woman looking at me. I smiled. She did too. I was trying to decide what to do next when she started walking in my direction. You're the photographer, aren't you? She asked. I was stunned. Ah, yes. At least I'm a photographer. I'm sorry, do I know you? I'm usually good with faces, but I didn't remember her at all. I knew she had never modeled for me. Not really, she said, extending her hand for a shake. My name is Jeanette. My ex-husband is Wally Simsky. You used to work with him. I saw you a few times when you met him at one of his houses, but I always stayed in the car. I don't think you even knew I was there. Now I knew who she was. Her ex was in real estate. When I first started my business, I used to shoot the interiors and exteriors of the houses he was selling. It didn't pay very much, but in those days I took whatever I could get. I remember that sometimes he had a woman sitting in his car when he met me at the house, but I was never introduced. How do you do? I said, shaking her hand. It's nice to finally meet you. Me too, she replied with a smile. At that moment, the guy sitting next to me left. I quickly put my hand on the stool to make room for her. She sat down and asked if I still worked for her ex. I replied that no, that I hadn't done that kind of work in 3 or 4 years. We seemed to get along quite well, and in a full hour of conversation, she never once mentioned astrology, which was fine with me. I asked her out, and she said yes. The next evening, I drove up to her house nervously. I wondered if she had the same goal for tonight as I did to getting laid. I hoped she was. She seemed like a nice person, and from what I'd seen the night before, she had a nice body, but there was certainly no spark, at least on my part. I knew it wasn't going to be a big romance between us, but a friend with benefits type relationship I certainly wouldn't mind. She pecked me on the cheek when she met me at the door, and we headed out for a nice dinner, dancing, and, I hoped, a night out. So, Steve, if I'm not being too nosy, what happened between you and your wife? She asked about halfway through our dinner. It's a long story, but mostly she believed in astrology rather than life, I replied. Ha, she grinned. I wish my breakup was so easily explained. I still don't know why Wally wanted a divorce. According to him, we were just estranged from each other. I think he was running from me, but I couldn't prove it. That's why I sat in the car sometimes. I wanted to make sure he wasn't seeing some whore. Sure, he always swore he wasn't having an affair, but I knew he was lying. Hell, all men have affairs. I bet you entertained some of those models when you were married, didn't you? I was stunned. Of course not, I replied indignantly. Liar, men are all the same. I felt my jaw drop to the floor as I listened to her tirade. Where did that come from? I puzzled. She hadn't been like this the night before. Hey, I said, interrupting her. I guess my anger should have burst through when I spoke. I hoped so. Let's forget about our exes and just have a good time tonight, huh? She looked up, as if a little embarrassed. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I just get worked up sometimes. We didn't say 3 words to each other the entire dinner, and I was already thinking about ending the night and forgetting about asking her to the dance. But I thought, what the hell? Maybe she's just nervous. I'll bear it and see if things get better. When we got to the club, it was certainly crowded. I looked around and figured there were at least 2 guys for every girl, and thanked myself that I already had a girl to dance with. We couldn't find a free table, but there were stands along the walls where people could put their drinks down while standing and watching the dance floor. We chose a seat and had only been there for a few seconds when a pretty bartender approached us to take our order. She explained that as long as our glasses were on a napkin, she knew we were dancing and wouldn't take our drinks away. When we left, we should put our glasses right on the bar so she knew we wouldn't be coming back. We waited until she brought our drinks so we wouldn't lose our place, and then I asked her to dance. My ancestors were masters at the jitterbug. I wasn't as good as they were, but I'd learned enough moves to get by, and was pleasantly surprised when she stayed by my side. Afterward, we took 2 steps to a slow song and then returned to our drinks. After her diatribe at dinner, I was a little shy about starting a conversation, but we needed to talk. She had told me the night before that she worked at a sports store as a manager, but we didn't delve into that topic. So, Jeanette, I know you're the manager, but what exactly do you do for the store? Mostly try to keep my boss off my back, she replied. I thought, oh no. I opened the gate again, but then a guy came up and saved me. At least that's what I thought at first. Hi, Jeanette. I've never seen you here before, he said, looking directly at my companion. Hello, Tom, she replied. Then, almost sequentially, she introduced us. Tom, this is Steve. Tom works at the store with me, she explained. Nice to meet you, I said cordially. He barely glanced in my direction with a slight nod of his head and completely ignored my outstretched hand. Would you like to dance? He asked Jeanette. Sure, she replied, not even glancing at me in approval. She left me standing still and walked out onto the floor with a jerk. If I cared about her even a little bit, I wouldn't have let this happen. But I had already decided that this was my first, last, and only date with Jeanette. I had completely given up hope of getting her as a girlfriend with benefits. I stood and sipped my beer, watching them dance 3 dances together without coming up for air. I took one last sip, took a napkin out from under the bottle, and walked out to them. Jeanette, I'm leaving. Let that asshole take you home. What? No, wait. I couldn't believe she was surprised by my actions. As I started to walk away, Tom grabbed my arm. What did you call me? He said, trying to act like a big man. I turned around and looked him straight in the eye. If you want to keep that hand, remove it immediately, I said, as menacingly as I could. Apparently, he didn't want to test me because he let go of my hand. Steve, wait, I'm sorry, we were just talking, she said, apparently trying to apologize. I didn't say anything else. I just turned around and walked to my car. All this dating is real shit, I thought as I drove home. Sunday morning, I was still pissed off. Instead of driving the 8 blocks to Denny's restaurant to get breakfast, I figured a walk would help me calm down. I had hoped to see Karen, but her shift hadn't started yet. From there, I needed to get back to the studio. I didn't have any filming scheduled, but since I had walked both Friday and Saturday night, I had a bunch of editing to do. As I walked into the office, I saw a light blinking on my phone letting me know I had a text message. Guess who it was from? Steve, I am so sorry about last night. Before you picked me up, I called Wally to let him know about our date. I tried to make him jealous, but instead he just told me what a great guy you were and wished we had fun. I was so mad at him. That's what caused all the ranting at dinner. Then I was so ashamed of what I said that when Tom showed up, it was kind of a relief. I just needed to get my mind off you for a few minutes. Tom really is a big jerk, and I had intended to reunite with you after that last dance. I guess I waited one dance too long, huh? Tom doesn't know where I live, and I wanted to keep it that way. So after you left, I took a cab home. I'm really ashamed of the way I treated you, so I apologize. I think I'll understand if you don't call me about dates anymore. Goodbye, Steve. I was glad she understood, because I had no intention of asking her out. After the divorce, she had even more problems than I did. I thought about Karen's words. I have enough emotional problems of my own, let alone yours. Now I knew exactly what she was talking about. Once again, for the next month, I dove headfirst into work. It was the only part of my life in which things were going well. One night I was looking through my books, but I couldn't sleep a wink. The next morning I woke up with my head lying on my desk. That's when I seriously considered hiring an assistant. I had been avoiding it since I started the business. All the taxes, insurance, rules, and regulations were a hassle for a small business like mine, but I could afford it, and I needed help. I was putting together an ad for the paper when the phone rang. Stephen Haynes Photography, I answered. Hi, Steve, it's Gail. Hey, doll, what are you shaking? I asked in a huff. Usually when she called, it was an invitation to something or other. Steve, did you know Barbara Sheffield? She was the one who ran the astrology club? I wondered why Gail was asking me about Barbara, since they had only met a couple times, and then it hit me. She said, Did you know? Yes, Gail. Why did something happen to her? She died of a stroke. I'm sorry. I know you liked her no matter what. Her obituary is in today's paper. The stroke happened last Friday, but she wasn't discovered in her apartment until Saturday. She was taken to the hospital, but she never regained consciousness and died on Sunday. It took me a minute. Hell, she was only in her early 50s, too young to die like that. Yeah, she was a really nice person, I said. She was the only person in Cora's group of friends that I was still in touch with. Doesn't it say where she'll be laid to rest? I asked. Yes, at Schuster's, she said. But you know, if you go to the wake, you'll probably run into Cora, Gail warned. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Barbara was actually a good friend. Even though Cora knew her much longer than I did, she was honest with me, and she was the one who informed me that Cora was cheating on me. After I filed for divorce, she called me and told me she was sorry. I think she felt guilty and blamed herself for telling me. I told her I appreciated what she had done and understood how hard it had been for her. We kept in touch from time to time after that. She always made sure not to mention Cora in front of me, and I always appreciated that. I need to go pay my respects, I said. I figured the best way to avoid the others was to be there on the first day of the screening as soon as the doors opened. It worked, at least for a few minutes. When I walked in, I didn't see anyone I recognized. I assumed they were relatives. I walked over to the casket and looked down. It was hard to recognize her. But isn't that always the case? I really regretted that I never talked to her after that lunch. I knew it was too late, but still I leaned over slightly and quietly, thanked her for being a true friend to me. As I turned around and headed for the door, I saw 2 members of the astrology club enter the room. Steve, Margaret said in surprise. Steve, Blackie repeated, holding out his hand. Hey guys, I replied, shaking Blackie's hand and giving Margaret a quick kiss on the cheek. I was so surprised to hear about Barbara. Was she sick, or did she let you know something was wrong? Nothing, Blackie replied. We were all at the club meeting the night before it happened, and she seemed fine. I shook my head in puzzlement. Has anyone seen Cora yet? They were so close. She must be having a really hard time, I said. They looked at each other. Well, Cora was kind of kicked out of the club after we found out all about her and Mark, Margaret informed me. We didn't kick them out. They started coming back to meetings, but no one would talk to them and they stopped coming. I said nothing, but my heart was relieved. Cora was very fond of that club and the people in it. It must have killed her when they turned against her. Well, I said, wanting to get out of there quickly before I ran into anyone from the club. I'm sorry to have to run, but I have a shoot I can't reschedule, so I have to go. I don't think they believed me, but they were kind enough to pretend they did. Look, Steve, don't be such an outsider. Everyone asks about you from time to time. Let us know how you're doing from time to time, Margaret said, returning my kiss on the cheek. I will, I said, starting to get nervous. I really didn't want to run into Cora if I could avoid it. I shook Blackie's hand again and headed for the door. I was just pulling out of the parking lot when I saw Cora pull up to the house. I was a little surprised to see she was alone. Where's your asshole perfect boyfriend? I caught myself thinking. I saw her eyes widen when she saw me, and it looked like she wanted me to stop, so I pushed her away and got out of there. On the way to the studio, I thought about what Karen, the waitress at Denny's, had said about all those feelings that were still bubbling up inside me. She was right. Even a year later, when I saw Cora again, all the resentment and anger rose to the surface again. I chided myself for letting it happen. Living a good life was the best revenge, I told myself. I had to work on it. Sure enough, after I returned to the studio, it became my life again. Another month passed, and I found myself editing the day's shoot again at 2 in the morning. Damn, I said to myself. I was going to get an assistant and forgot about it. Tomorrow I'll write an ad and post it. I need help. So I did. I placed an ad in the paper and on the website, and the very next day I had 6 interviews. After interviewing the first 4, I was almost ready to give up. I didn't expect them to know much about my job. I could have trained them, but they had to be teachable. Half of the people who came in couldn't even fill out a job application. I had just escorted the last applicant out the door and was heading back to my office, grumbling something about half the day being wasted, when suddenly I heard the door open. I turned around and saw Megan standing there with a startled look on her face. I had to admit that she looked beautiful. Megan, what a nice surprise. I'm glad you're here. I want to apologize. Sen, Mr. Haynes, please, I'm the one who should be apologizing. I'm very sorry. For what? I asked. Because is there somewhere I can sit down? I'm a little nervous. Sure, follow me, I said, leading her through the studio to my office. Here, I said, motioning her a chair. Have a seat. Would you like a cup of coffee? I just made it. Yes, please. She sat down and took a sip before speaking again. Mr. Haynes? I thought we had that settled, I said, interrupting her again. My name is Steve, remember? Okay, Steve, she replied with a smile. Now please stop interrupting me, or I'll never be able to say what I came here to say. Shoot, I said, sitting down across from her. Mr. H. Ah, Steve. When I first saw your work years ago, I thought you were very talented. Over the years, you've produced some of the best work I've seen, and I'm not the only one who thinks so. I was about to say something modest, but she threw me a look that told me I'd better not interrupt her again. I only smiled modestly and sat back down. I've also heard some of the people you've worked with say what an amazing guy you are. I've wanted to meet you for a long time, but I haven't had the chance. I knew you were married and I was engaged, so I didn't have any romantic expectations. I just thought, well, I may have had a few romantic notions, but I knew they were just fantasies. I thought I saw my chance as she took another sip of coffee. Megan, Please, Steve, let me get through this. I fell silent and she continued. I've known Gail for years. We work out together at the gym all the time. She knew about my fiancé leaving and invited me to her New Year's Eve party. I declined at first, but then she started telling me about a wonderful, recently divorced guy who would be there. When she said your name, I almost died. I couldn't believe it. I told her how I'd wanted to meet you for a long time, and I immediately accepted the invitation. Then I started to get nervous. By the time I got to the party, I was like delirious. A couple hundred odd shots of Brad's vodka helped me calm down, and by the time you arrived, I was pretty relaxed. She sipped more coffee and continued. Anyway, when we started talking, I was still pretty nervous, but the conversation flowed normally until there was a little lull. Remember? That's when I asked about your sign. I remembered all too well, and it probably reflected on my face. Steve, I had no idea what happened between you and your wife. I know nothing about astrology, absolutely nothing. I just said that because guys ask me all the time what my sign is, and it was the first thing that came into my head. Hell, I don't even know my sign. I say I'm a Virgo because they're supposed to be well-organized people. At least that's what I was told. When you left, I realized I said something wrong, but I didn't know what. I started crying, and that's when Gail came in and took me upstairs and put me to bed in the guest room. It wasn't until the next day, when she and Brad told me what had happened between you and your wife, that I realized my words must have hurt you terribly. I wanted to apologize, but I was embarrassed, and maybe a little scared. It wasn't until I saw the ad in yesterday's paper that I plucked up the courage to come. An ad? I interjected. You mean for a job? She nodded her head. Yes, I wanted to apply, but I couldn't without apologizing first. I was dumbfoundedly silent for a moment. First of all, I'm the one who owes you an apology. She started to say something, but I held up my hand. Now it's my turn to speak. Like I said, I'm really sorry for leaving you at the party in that state. It was incredibly rude of me. You have no idea what happened between Cora and me, and I shouldn't have reacted that way. Again, I'm truly sorry. Secondly, I would love to have someone with your qualifications working here, but I'm afraid there's no way I can pay you as much as you make at Allen's. A slight smirk appeared on her face. How much do you think a designer makes at Allen's? No, wait, she said quickly. Maybe I should find out how much you pay before I tell you. Truth be told, I wasn't planning on paying more than minimum wage, but I also didn't expect to find someone with your expertise. As I advertised, I thought about how much I could pay if I actually found someone I could rely on. There was no point in haggling. I'd be happy to pay her top dollar. It would actually be worth it just to have her around to look up to, I thought. Megan, I'd like to pay more, but I'm afraid the best I can do is $500 a week. Of course, that includes... I agree, she whispered. Really? Said I, looking more like an excited schoolboy than a seasoned businessman. Yes, she said, but I'll have to give Alan a couple weeks' notice, do you mind? Yeah, sure. Well, I said, standing up and extending my hand, welcome to Stephen Haynes Photography. I showed her around the studio. From the way she was attentive and the way she asked questions, I knew she would be very helpful. I had her fill out an application as well as insurance forms. Just as she was leaving, a client walked in. She smiled broadly when I introduced her as my new assistant. The next day, she called me. Hi, Steve. Can I still call you Steve, or should I go back to Mr. Haynes since you're my boss now? Hi, Megan, and if I catch you calling me Mr. Haynes, I might take away your paycheck, I joked. She chuckled. Okay, Steve, just checking in. I'm calling to let you know that Allen's is going to make me work for 2 weeks. I was hoping they'd let me go when I notified them, but no such luck. Oh, I didn't expect them to let you go, Megan. I expected them to keep you there as long as they could. I wouldn't be surprised if they offered you a raise to entice you to stay, I told her, suddenly feeling apprehensive. I hadn't thought about it until I said it. Damn, I wondered. Would they be able to lure her back? They already did, she replied. I told them, no thanks. A couple times over the next couple weeks, Megan stopped by the studio in the evening to help me out. I couldn't believe how lucky I was to have a woman like her. The first day she came in ready to work. By noon, we had done more in a few hours than I would have done all day on my own. Megan, it's customary here for me to buy lunch for all my employees on their first day. All of your employees? How many have you had? A surprised Megan asked. You're the first, but all customs have to start somewhere, I grinned. I hung the for lunch sign on the door, locked it, and took her to Denny's, which was my favorite lunch spot. We found a booth in Karen's section and sat down. Hey, Steve, you brought company today, she said. You know that means big tips, right? She said with a smile. Hi, Karen. Meet Megan. She just started work today as my new assistant. Karen looked shocked for a moment. Your assistant, really? She asked, looking at Megan. Megan grinned and nodded her head. Yes, she answered proudly. Congratulations, Megan. Maybe now Mr. Workaholic won't have to come in at 1 o'clock in the morning anymore. Not if I can help it, Megan replied, looking at me. We had a great conversation over lunch. She told me that she had fallen in love with photography in college and was looking forward to going on shoots with me to see how I worked. When we were about to finish, Megan excused herself to the ladies' room, and Karen brought me the check. Looks like I missed out, yeah? She said as I dug through my cash. Missed what? You. You asked me out, and like an idiot, I turned you down. I can be really stupid sometimes. Karen, I don't know what you're talking about. You want to go on a date? Is the offer still on the table? Don't be ridiculous. She wouldn't like it. Who wouldn't like it? Megan, silly, this girl is in love with you. Don't tell me you haven't realized that yet. Karen, we don't even know each other, not really. Besides, she works for me. It would be a conflict of interest to get involved. She only smiled. We'll see, she said. The two girls crossed paths as Karen left. They said something to each other, but I couldn't hear what. Megan was smiling when she returned to the table. That night, I closed the studio for the first time in a year and went home before 6 in the evening. I didn't know what to do with myself when I got home. By the end of the first month, I wondered how I had ever gotten along without Megan. She was a quick learner and already knew most of my lighting techniques. She was as good at editing my work as I was, and she was such a pleasure to be around. A few times I caught myself fantasizing about having fun with her, but now that she was my collaborator, I decided that was out of the question. As Erica had told me, it was a conflict of interest. If she and I hit it off and then split up, I could lose her as my assistant, and I couldn't take that risk. Steve, Jim Roper called the other day. He wants you to call him back as soon as you get in, Megan told me when I got back from running some errands. I immediately picked up the phone and called him back. Jim was the man in charge of advertising Cheetown Candy, my biggest client. Hey Jim, it's Steve. I just came by and Megan told me to call you back. Yeah, by the way, who's Megan? Since when do you have an assistant? Since a couple months ago, I told him. Things got so crazy around here that I had to hire someone. Does she look as appetizing as she sounds on the phone? A guy who works at a candy company should use a word like delicious when describing a woman. Melt in your mouth, I replied, using his lingo. Megan looked right at me when I said that, but I was sure she had no idea what I was talking about. You're going to take her with you to Peoria, aren't you? Ah, I didn't know I was going to Peoria, Jim. When will that be? That's what I wanted to talk to you about. We're running a campaign to follow up on those commercials you did for us on the River Walk, only this time we're doing it right. We're going to do a series of commercials. We're going to need 3 different models. Are we going to have time to do all that? I asked. If I remember correctly, the Riverfront Association kept us on a short leash last time. Steve, they got so much free publicity from our ads that they're going to be out of their depth this time. The whole place is at our disposal for as long as we need it. I'm guessing 3 days, 4 at the most. You need to tell me when you can do it. I need to know as soon as possible so I can get everything organized. Okay, Jim. I'll check my schedule and get back to you later today. Do you have any models or do you want me to take care of it? I have one, he replied. I don't think you know her. Her name is Jessica and she's from Los Angeles. The boss saw her picture somewhere and had to get her for this. The other 2 I'll leave to your discretion. Okay, I said. Let me do some maneuvering and get back to you before the end of the day, I told him before saying goodbye. What was that? Megan asked. It sounded exciting. Well, I don't know about exciting. That's not exactly how I'd describe Peoria, but it'll be fun. Let's go check the schedule. We need to find a place where we can spend 4 full days. I also need to call Erica Snell and Jean Mathers to see if they can get involved in modeling. Megan and I got to work, and by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I had called Jim back with the schedule and everything was set. Jessica would fly straight in from LA, and everyone else would meet at Denny's for an early breakfast and drive to Peoria in a 5-car caravan. Megan rode with me, Erica and Jean rode together, and Jim and the rest of the advertising staff made up the rest of the caravan. When we checked into the motel, we were told that Jessica had already arrived. We found her by the side of the pool, dressed, well, almost dressed in a tiny little bikini that left little to the imagination. It was understandable why Jim's boss wanted to get her. She was stunning. Jim sent one of his guys down to the riverfront to scout out locations while the rest of us discussed what we were going to shoot. Megan, who had experience with set design, suggested a couple of her ideas, which both Jim and I thought were great. It was almost noon when we started shooting, but we had a very productive day. Later, we all went out to eat and then went back to the motel to get to bed early. The next day was going to be a long one. We were going to shoot from dawn to dusk. And I was just sinking into sleep when I heard a faint knock on the door. Megan. She was standing there. Hi, Steve, she said, greeting me with a wide smile. Can I come in? Oh, yeah, sure, I said, stumbling halfway in. I closed the door behind her. She stood for a few seconds before she spoke. Steve, I sincerely hope I'm not jeopardizing my job. Please don't fire me. I know I shouldn't do this, but I can't help it. I've waited as long as I could. She walked over to me and kissed me. We collapsed on the bed. Later, she whispered, I love you, Stephen Haynes. I knew it before I met you. I knew it as soon as I saw your work. I know I'm taking a risk. I've known you a lot longer than you've known me, but at the restaurant that first day, Karen told me that I had better tell you how I felt, or I might lose you. I lay there trying to understand what Megan was saying. She loved me. But did I love her? I vowed to myself to never give my heart away again. Never again put myself in a position to be hurt, like I was with Cora. All I needed was a mate with benefits. Was I ready for more? My heart was beating so hard, I was afraid it might stop. Please say something, Steve. Please, Megan pleaded. I smiled. Megan, no, you're not fired. You haven't ruined anything. I thought about that statement for a second and smiled. Well, that's not entirely true, is it? We both chuckled. However, I need a little time to think it over. When Cora and I were together, she was the most important thing in my life. As a result, when we broke up, it nearly killed me, and I swore I would never let that happen again. I would never let myself fall in love with another person that much. Ever. Lately, though, I'll admit, ever since you came into my life, I've been struggling with these feelings. When you're not with me, I miss you. When I come home at night, I think of you. I dream of waking up next to you the next morning. Honestly, I don't know if I can love you as much as I love Cora. I don't know if I'll ever love someone as much again, but I know I don't want to lose you. I want you in my life, Megan. Can you agree to that? At least for now. She smiled. Thus, we fell asleep. Hey, are you guys up yet? Come on, chop chop, it'll be daylight in an hour. Jim's voice came out, waking us up. Looks like our secret's out, huh? Said Megan with a slightly worried look. How did he find out? Honey, after last night, I'm sure the whole motel knows about it. We were pretty loud. Megan looked so embarrassed, then smiled. You called me cute, she said. Yes, I did, didn't I? Half an hour later, we all met for breakfast and then headed to the river for a long day of filming. Again, Megan was invaluable as my assistant and made suggestion after suggestion, most of which we accepted. That night, as well as the next, she again went to bed with me. The morning we were to leave, I woke up and looked at her. She was smiling in her sleep. If I was honest with myself, I had to compare the previous 3 days to some of the most wonderful days of my life, even the ones I had spent with Cora. Did that mean I was falling in love? Despite my determination not to let it happen, was I really letting my heart be threatened again? I could only give one answer. Yes. As scary as it was, I had fallen in love. Again. Is something wrong, Steve? Asked Megan about an hour after we drove home. You've been awfully quiet. Nothing's wrong, Megan. I've just been doing a lot of thinking, soul digging. Do you regret that we slept together? I know you're still hurting over Cora. I would never have had the courage to approach you the way I did. But after what Karen said, well, my fear of losing you was greater than my fear of telling you how I felt. I'm sorry, Steve. I didn't mean to pressure you into doing something you didn't want to do. That's the thing, Megan. I want this, more than anything. When Cora and I broke up, I said to myself, never again. And I did, at least then. I've spent the last year and a half trying to steel myself, telling myself that I didn't need anyone, that my studio was my only passion. And for a while, I believed that too. And then you came along and showed me how stupid I was. You made me realize how lonely an existence with that kind of attitude can be. You opened my heart again and walked right in. I still have many emotions to deal with, but I'm sure one of them is love. Love for you, I said. Steve, I looked at her. She was very emotional and tears were streaming from her eyes. Are you okay? I asked. Yeah, she replied, nodding her head slowly and reaching into her purse for a tissue. It's like a dream come true. I've wanted this for so long, but I never dared to think it would actually happen. She wiped her eyes. I love you with all my heart. When we got back to Chicago, we talked and decided to take our time. After all, we hadn't even met yet, so that's where we decided to start. A couple days after we got back, Jim stopped by the studio to see what we already had from the shoot. Where's Megan? He asked after being there for a few minutes and not seeing her. She left on business, I informed him. You're a lucky man, Steve. She's wonderful, beautiful, smart. God, what I wouldn't have done to find one, he said with desperation in his voice. I didn't know what you were looking for. You always seemed to be happy as a bachelor. Don't get me wrong, I'm fine with it. It's just that when I see a couple like you and Megan, well, I guess I'm just a little jealous. I figured sometimes I could be dangerous when I did that. What do you think about the kids? I asked him. You're kidding. I love kids. I have a wonderful father, and I've always wanted to be just like him. Of course you have to have kids before you can be a father. What about someone else's child? Can you be a good father if the woman already has a child? He looked at me suspiciously. What are you getting at? Jim, have you had lunch yet? No, why? Sam! Because there's a waitress at Denny's where we all had breakfast before we left for Peoria. Her name is Karen. She's absolutely gorgeous, not to mention smart and outgoing. She has a 7-year-old boy. Come on, let's have lunch. I'll introduce you and then you're on your own. I introduced them, and by the time we left, they were like old friends. They started dating and even went out together a few times with Megan and me. A few more months went by, and I realized that I had done it. Given my heart to Megan. I just prayed that she would take better care of it than Cora did. Those of you who have never been to Chicago in the fall don't know what you're missing. The leaves on the trees turn beautiful shades of orange, yellow, and red and dance with the light breeze against the royal blue sky. During the day, the temperature is perfect for a tracksuit, and the nights are made for cuddling up with your loved one. On just such a fall evening, Megan and I were walking along the lakeshore. We sat and watched from the large rocks as bright yellow moonbeams danced on the black water. Brrr, she said, as the breeze shifted and blew in off the lake. I put my arms around her and pulled her close to me. It had been a little over 2 years since the night I'd caught Cora with Mark, and proclaimed myself a loner from now on. I had already broken the promise I had made to myself. It was time to make it official. Megan, I want to thank you. For what, honey? For fixing my heart. Just 2 years ago I thought it was shattered, and I didn't expect it to ever work just to keep me alive. But you have shown it how to love again. For that, I shall be eternally grateful to you. Oh, that's so sweet. She stopped talking as I slid off the rock and dropped to my knees. Oh my God. Steve, you didn't? She clamped her hand over her mouth and started squealing. Megan Biondi, I said, pulling the ring out of my pocket. Will you marry me? She was at a loss for words. She just held out her left hand and nodded, tears streaming from her eyes. I put the ring on her finger just before she jumped off the cliff and threw herself into my arms. She kissed me a few times and then laid her head on my chest. She still couldn't speak. We set a date for the following May. It was an unseasonably warm day in early March. Megan and I were sitting in the back office sorting out our latest assignment when I heard someone come through the front door. I'll see who it is, honey, I said, as I stood up and headed for the exit. At first, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. Cora. Hi, Steve, she said modestly. How are you? She looked good. Her blonde hair was as silky as I remembered it, and her blue eyes were like the waters of a Caribbean island. I'm doing fine, Cora. How about you? She tried to smile weakly. Oh, not too well. I've come to tell you that I'm sorry for what I did to you to us. You were right all along. Life is what we make of it, not what the stars say. I still didn't know it the last time we spoke. In the restaurant, I told you I was sorry for my affair and my dishonesty about it. When you confronted me in the motel room, I'd never been so ashamed in my life. When you broke my rings, I broke down with guilt. I never meant to hurt you like that. But at the same time, I still believed that Mark was my destiny, not you. God, how can a girl be wrong? So you don't believe in astrology anymore? No, I don't believe anymore, Steve. The stars told me Barbara would live to a ripe old age, and she died at 57. The stars told me you were untrustworthy, and I was the one who was deceived. The stars told me Mark was my perfect match, and it turns out he tried to sell me to his friends. Now he's in jail for drug possession. Can you believe he thought I'd bail him out? Mark was an unbelievable disaster. And when I think about what I threw away, well, no, Steve. Astrology is bullshit, like you've always said. I just wish you'd convinced me of that before I ruined our marriage. I tried, Cora. I begged you. I know you tried, she said, bowing her head. She looked at my left hand. I see you haven't put the ring on yet. Is it too late to try again, Steve? At that moment, Megan came out of the back room and gave me a hug. I knew she had overheard our conversation and had come out to make her claim. Honey, Oh, I'm sorry, she said tokenistically. I didn't realize you were talking to a customer. Until that second, there had been hope on Cora's face. Megan, this is Cora, my ex-wife. Cora, this is Megan, my fiancée. We're getting married next month, I told her, trying not to sound like I was rubbing it in. Cora, Megan greeted her, extending her hand. It's so nice to meet you. I felt a little sorry when a look of desperation appeared in Cora's eyes. She and Megan shook hands, and Cora graciously extended her congratulations to us. Well, you two, she said, with eyes glistening with tears. I just stopped by to say hello. I hope you both will be very happy together. Megan, treat him right. He's a hell of a nice guy, she said, and turned around and hurried towards the exit. I watched as she walked quickly past the window. She sobbed. Are you okay? My bride-to-be asked. Yes, honey, I'm fine. She said she doesn't believe in astrology anymore. Maybe this will set her free and she can find someone again. I hope so. On my wedding day, I thought I was going to be nervous, but I wasn't. I knew it was the right thing to do. Gail was the matron of honor and Brad was my best man. My family attended the wedding and Megan's mom flew in as well. She was a more grown-up version of her daughter. Jim, Karen, and her son Daniel were also in the audience, and I knew they would be next. In the months leading up to the wedding, Megan kept me in suspense. She asked me not to buy myself an engagement ring. I had no idea why, and she didn't want to tell me. She said I would find out on the wedding day. Surprisingly, the buttons didn't come off my tuxedo when I saw my bride-to-be walking down the aisle. She was the most beautiful bride I had ever seen. The priest began the ceremony. We each said our vows. Then it was time for the rings. For the second and last time in my life, I proudly said, "With this ring I am married," and slipped it on her finger. Megan took my left hand. My father was the best man I ever knew. She told me loud enough for everyone to hear. I was his princess, and he was my king. He was taken from us when I was only 16. The only thing my mother had left of him was his wedding ring. She wanted me to give it to you on the happiest day of my life. We both know he would have approved. It is with this ring that I am getting married, she said with tears in her eyes. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Epilogue. 6 months after Steve and Megan's wedding, Jim and Karen also wed. Daniel was Jim's best man. Megan and Steve continued to work together, and Steve's studio grew in size, growing and growing. Within 3 years of the wedding, it had 5 employees. This was good because by then, Megan was pregnant with her second child, and Steve needed help. Every little girl should have a baby brother, and Lindsay Haynes was about to have one. It was a Sunday afternoon, a perfect day to go shopping at the mall. A very pregnant Megan walked beside her husband, who was pushing Lindsay in a stroller. They smiled and talked and laughed as they shopped for clothes for their newborn. They didn't even notice Cora as they walked past the food court, but she noticed them. She watched the proud parents walk by. They were so happy together. Nat, she remembered the baby talk they had when they were still married. Back then, it had made her so happy that sometimes she thought her heart would burst. Now they were just sad remnants of her childish foolishness. Cora reached up and brushed the tears from her eyes, but new ones followed. Oh God, how could I have been so blind? She muttered to herself. They had been in several stores already, and she could only see their backs, wondering if she would ever be this happy, if she would ever find someone she could love like Steve, if life would give her another chance, if she even deserved a second chance. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she sobbed involuntarily, pulling a tissue from her purse. One thing she was sure of: if she ever found another man, a man she could love and who would love her, she would not miss him again. She would be the best, most loving wife and mother a man had ever had. But what were the odds? The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.